Good morning, Magic. I'm Gavin Verhey from Wizards of the Coast, and I'm joined here once again with Melissa DeTora. How are you doing today, Melissa?
I'm doing great. We just had our very successful first week of casual play design, so I'm really excited. We just had a bunch of new people start. We're working on a ton of Commander products and things I can't talk about. So, as I say it to you, it sounds lame, right? Because we can't talk about it. But we're working on really cool stuff. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah, 100%. I can't wait to get them on the show at some point. For all you listening out there, there's probably a number of folks like Elizabeth Rice, Elliot DeVale on Twitter, Jeremy Geis, who was a runner-up in GDS3, and plus a lot of other really cool people who you haven't heard yet or met of yet that I'd love to have on the show to talk with you about some of the, stuff in their experience here. The problem is, of course, you join, you can't talk about anything you've done for like a year minimum, really more like a year and a half. So it takes some time, but I'm pretty stoked about what they're contributing to sets. They've already provided a bunch of feedback on one of my sets, so I'm stoked about that. But yeah, it's been a busy week here at Wizards for sure. Just whenever new people show up, it's always awesome. Also, folks are starting to come back into the office, so I'm still at home today, as you can see. But I know you've been in the office some too, right?
Yeah, I've been in the office. I'm home today because I had to record this wonderful video with you, and I figured it was easier to record at home. So I ended up working from home today. But yeah, I have been going in. It's been great to be back. We have our cafe, so we can get our coffee fix, and I guess our sandwich fix, although sandwiches are less exciting. Yeah, it's just great to see people again,
Can't say no to the grilled cheese. Yeah, I remember I was in the other day and I had like a question for someone. I was like, okay, I got to write up this long message and like run them through everything. And then I was like, wait a second. No, I don't. I just like walk over to their desk and ask them the question.
That happened to me too. Like somebody came up to me and asked me a question. I was like, this has not happened in 2 years. This is weird.
So yeah, I mean, I'm still only in a day or two a week. We're doing various sliding schedules, hybrid kind of stuff, but it is cool to go back in and see people. Speaking of which, a couple of things for today's episode. I guess 3 things I want to mention before we get going. 1, due to various snafus and space-time continuum breaks, the previous one is not up at the time that we're recording this one. So I'm just going to assume that the last one went over great, except for that one thing that you all probably hated. I don't know what it's going to be, but there'll probably be one thing. So just know that as we're recording this, so if you had strong feedback from last week's episode, it's not incorporated into this yet. Number 2 on my end, very exciting. Speaking of going back to the office, I just got my COVID booster shot yesterday. So hooray, everyone, if you're eligible, please go out and get yours. If you aren't vaccinated yet, please go get your shots. But at any point during this episode, maybe I'll start feeling horrible. I don't know. I haven't yet, but if I give any bad takes, that's what I'm going to blame it on 100%.
Okay.
And third is I've actually got a bit of a construction going on in the background here, but the show must go on. So I'll try and, fix any noise in post here. But if you hear a very loud bang or clatter or something, that's what's going on out there. All things will fix. No problem. Other than that, golden rule always applies. We're going to be talking about our coworkers' designs or ex-coworkers' designs. We love them. We know a lot of effort was put into this set. We care about them a lot. And we know how hard it is to design Magic sets. I've designed plenty of things that have gone poorly. With all of our critiquing is done with love, right?
Absolutely.
And soon we're actually going to be getting into the ones that I started working on. So especially then I'll have some harsh words to say about my own stuff. But that's a story for another week. And then finally, for all you out there watching, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And as always, leave comments down below. It really means a lot to both of us. Reading all your comments from the past several episodes has been good impetus for us to keep going, keep doing these. And I don't know, just it's awesome to see, right?
Yeah.
Melissa could not agree more. And with that, we're all just like, we'll get through this entry point because we have a lot to talk about today. This is talking about Commander 2015. So we've done the original decks, 2013, 2014, and we're now launching into 2015. These were launched on November 13th, 2015. So basically the same time frame as all the other decks, about a week later, but same difference. And for kind of launching in your time frame here, these were between Battle for Zendikar and Oath of the Gatewatch.
Okay.
So if you were a standard player back then, you might remember the Atarka red decks, which were like mono red decks that splashed for Atarka's command. With the new Zendikar dual lands that were out, you could fetch land for them. So there were all these like 4-color decks running around where you would like go fetch for your 4th color and play ridiculous combination of cards, cast Mantis Rider and Siege Rhino in the same deck. And then, of course, Abzan was still running around causing trouble.
Yep, you had the 4-color soup decks that had these like wacky names like Jeskai Black and I don't know, Moist Mardu, and you get what I'm saying. You know what I mean.
Nothing I love like Moist Mardu. What a deck name that was. Yeah. But Jeskai, Dark Jeskai, Jeskai Black, that was a big one at the Pro Tour. I know there were like some green-white Mega Morph decks. Did you play in this one, Melissa? Were you qualified?
Actually, at this time, I was at Wizards. So
right.
We are actually talking about a time when I was inside the building. So exciting time.
Wow. And do you remember what you were working on at that point?
Yeah, let's see. Do you remember the month? Like that might give me a better idea, but maybe not.
It's coming out in November 13th, 2015.
Okay. So November was later in the year. And so this is like kind of a funny / sad story because I was a contractor at Wizards and I knew that I wasn't going to get converted to full time. So I knew that like December was going to be my last month. I was just going to be gone after a year. But fear not, I came back. So, and I've been here ever since. Like, but at the time I was pretty sad and bummed because I knew that like I wasn't going to get hired. So that was, it was just sad. It was just a sad time, you know? And anyway, as for what was I working on? So since this was the end of the year, I'm pretty sure we were working on Kaladesh. That sounds about right. So
yeah, that sounds about right to me too. And that's a set that went through a lot of iteration. Wow, so many things changed between vehicles and energy. And then there was a mechanic in that set for a while that was sort of like what Lesson Learn ended up being.
Yes, it was called it was called Invent or something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Invent,
Find an invention.
You could go find a 1 mana cost artifact from outside the game and put it into your hand or whatever.
Yeah.
Which was really challenging to get right.
Yeah, it was because these artifacts had to be weak enough to justify like just having like basically a tutor from your sideboard, yet strong enough to actually want to play in your main decks. So I remember that was super challenging, and it eventually just got cut from the set.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things we talked about a lot there, not to go off on too far of a tangent, but when you have a set with a lot of new things, you have to dedicate your testing resources to like some of these things, of course. And if you have too many new things, you split yourself really far thinly across all of them. And so I remember it was like, all right, try out vehicles, new thing, try out energy, new thing, try out inventions, new thing. And something just had to go because there wasn't the resources to work on it. That
is a really good point. And actually, during this time, there wasn't even a play design team. It was called the development team, and the work was similar, but the process was kind of different. We didn't have the resources to test every card, let alone all these brand new mechanics that were unknown and weird and required a lot of resources. Like we just didn't have the resources for that. And that was like a lot of the reasons why the play design team was formed, was because we realized, hey, we actually need people to play test this stuff and not just kind of do theory crafting and play a couple games and call it a day, you know? So we ended up like messing up pretty bad on Smuggler's Copter, to name one. The whole energy mechanic was another one that we got a lot of the rates kind of wrong on. Like we thought it was harder to get energy than it actually ended up being, and just kind of misevaluated a couple of things about the mechanic.
Right. I know when we were working on energy originally, we had like this big dream of, you get a bunch of energy and then you like spend it on different things and it's going to be really cool. But in reality, it just became about get as much energy as possible and then find the most powerful output. And then it was, just like funneling all that into your, whatever the wheel spin card was.
Yeah. The Aetherworks Marvel. Yeah. So that ended up being like the biggest thing for a while. But like another one that I remember was Whirler Virtuoso. Was that the one? No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because you one Thopter for 3 energy.
Yeah, that was like a thing that like basically it depended on the matchup, but like if you were playing against a deck that needed to gum up the board, you had your Whirler Virtuoso and you just spent all your energy on that. And if you were playing against, I don't know, something where Aetherworks Marvel was strong, you had that, like spin the wheel, get a powerful thing against like, I don't know, most things.
Right. You flip your Ulamog, get your cast trigger, blow up the permanents. Yeah, that was a wild time.
That was just a super unhealthy standard for a lot of reasons, and a lot of reasons why a play design team happened. Like I ended up leaving Wizards at the end of that year. And when I came back 6 months later, like I found out what Smuggler's Copter ended up being in the final design, and a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, that's all I'll
this
say.
Is going to be rough. Yeah. Well, yeah, I know that. Yeah, we tried building in some answers to it, but anyway, that's for a different show. I know you're all here to hear about Commander, but maybe at some point, Melissa and I will do some fun stories from the past like that. After we get through all the Commander decks, maybe we'll do sets or I don't know, something.
Who's to say? Maybe we don't have a ton left, right? Maybe we do. I don't know how many Commander decks there are.
But we keep making more. So
we'll
see what happens.
We'll keep having more episodes.
Totally. Plus, there's like Conspiracy and Battle Bond maybe to talk about. We got stuff anyway. So yeah, at this point, let's see. I was working on Kaladesh Aether Revolt too. So you and I are probably about lockstep here. The biggest thing for me is when these decks were coming out was about when I was starting to design Commander 2017. In the last episode, I talked about how like I was given the opportunity a while after the C14 decks were out, and I think I was like knee deep in designing C17 when C15 hit. I remember Ben Hayes, the lead designer, actually walking over to me with like a file of designs, like a literal paper file of designs that he didn't use for C15. It's like, hey, if you want any of these, check these out, which I thought was kind of cool. So yeah, that's kind of what I was up to at this point. So as this set was coming out, a lot of that inspiration was being turned into stuff for C17. All right, so let's get into the deck. So there's 56 new cards among these 5 decks. Notably, that's actually 5 fewer than the year before. And we'll talk about that maybe a little bit, but there's a lot of uncommons in these decks that kind of run across multiple decks. So 56 total new cards. And Melissa, do you know what the color combinations are that are happening this time?
Offhand, no, but hey, it's right here. It looks like enemy colors.
Correct. Yeah. Enemy color combinations. And it made sense. So we did all the 3 color combinations, right? We did enemies, then, or I guess not enemies, but the wedges, then the shards. Then we did monocolor. Makes sense. So the next natural pairing was enemy colors. And I know part of the design goal was to try and give support to things that didn't already have a ton of support. Enemy colors after those were one of the ones that needed the most help. So that's how we got here. We also talked last time about how we started seeding old characters in with cards like Eldon and what have you. That were the first time we kind of did these throwback characters. And that continues here in C15. Notably, something Ben Hayes did that I think is kind of cool is every deck kind of has a different plane associated with it. We'll get into that in a little bit, but every deck has a plane and then it has a returning mechanic from that plane among the cards in the deck. So for example, there's a Daxos deck and that's themed to Theros. It has an enchantments theme. So that was kind of a clever little thing. I think that was done there. Design team wise, just run through their names really fast. On the vision design team, we had Dan Emmons as the lead, who has since left, but missed working with him. Kelly Diggs, Ethan Fleischer, James Hotta, and Chris Tulloch. The development team was Ben Hayes as the lead, who also left recently, a good friend of mine, miss him dearly. Kelly Diggs, Mark Lobis, Sean Main, and James Rose. A number of folks there who are still at the company, some who have left, and a lot of people who I really enjoyed working with. Kelly Diggs, another person who did some really amazing things on the creative side. So thanks to all these people for their contributions. And now we're going to talk about your work. So let's dig in. Let's start off with the first deck here. This is called Call the Spirits. And this is the white-black deck. So I guess we'll get right into the commander first. So there's a lot to take in here as we look at Daxos the Returned. Now, there's a lot of stuff going on with Daxos the Returned. So I'm going to read Daxos off to you. Here's what Daxos the Returned does. It's 1 white-black for a 2/2 legendary creature zombie soldier. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, you get an experience counter. Get to that in a second. 1 white-black, create a white and black spirit enchantment creature token. It has this creature's power and toughness are each equal to the number of experience counters you have. So first of all, enchantment matters, as I mentioned. Second of all, returning character, Daxos, literally returning, I suppose, in this sense. And third, it gains experience counters. So Melissa, you want to talk about what experience counters are for a second?
Yeah, so experience counters are a thing that a player gets, usually by fulfilling a condition. It's pretty flavorful. You do a thing and you've learned something, so you get experience. So
what does it do? Does it have any like inherent meaning or anything?
Well, if you have something in play that cares about experience counters, then yes, but otherwise, no, not really.
So it's not like Infect, where there's a game rule. If you have 10 counters, you lose the game. It's like, all your cards key off of experience counters. Right. If you manage to put all of them in the same deck together, they could theoretically key off of each other. But most of the time, you're just, you're just playing your commander and you've got that thing keying off of all your other counters that commander accrues you. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, Daxos' whole thing is you get counters over time. It builds up and builds up and builds up and then scales into the long game by making these bigger and bigger enchantment creature tokens. Thoughts on Daxos and experience counters in general?
Okay, let's start with experience counters. So it's a object or like a resource that you get that you have to track for the rest of the game. And that can always be pretty annoying, especially when the permanent leaves the battlefield. It's just always something that you have to have and track for the rest of the game. If it's on a commander, that's okay. You're going to cast your commander again. If it's just on a card near 99 or whatever, then that can be just kind of annoying to be like, oh, okay, now I have this thing that I have forever. It's pretty flavorful, so I like that about it. I think I dislike more things than I like about it, though. Unfortunately, like it scales like super, super well and hard. Like as you gain experience, like your opponent might still feel bad killing your commander because this thing is just going to come back and be just as powerful. Like you don't have to do any more buildup or anything. I think that just has its pros and cons.
Yeah, I can kind of see it both ways. On one hand, it's kind of frustrating that your card is like, it never weakens. On the other hand, it's kind of nice to have something scale into the long game of like, oh, like I play my thing and on turn 3, it's kind of weak, but on turn 10, it's awesome. So it like heads in the right direction. I think part of the problem with experience counters, or one of the challenges with it, is that it just can turbo too quickly. Like a lot of the best experience counters decks, actually not unlike the energy decks we're talking about earlier, are all about like turbo your experience counters and then start doing broken stuff, which can be a challenging play pattern.
Yeah, and I'll be honest, these decks came out at a time where I wasn't really playing Commander, so I don't actually know these cards super well. Like I'm familiar with the mechanic and I've read some of the cards before, but I don't really have a ton of experience playing with them. So this is just like all like theory crafting about what I'm saying. So all right, we can now talk about actual Daxos.
Let's talk about Daxos.
Like, so what I like is it gives you a deck building hook. It says, hey, put a lot of enchantments in your deck. And like, that's cool. It's always nice to just have like directional cards like that. What I don't like is this card looks just really strong once you get it going. And the play pattern it just isn't great. Like if this is not your first time listening to this, I've talked about this actually a lot on previous of these podcasts, but this rate is just super strong for the effect, especially as it scales. For 3 mana, you just get like a large token at any time and untapped. So there's always like this threat of activation, and like the opponent just is like, oh, you have 3 mana, you're going to have a giant thing. I guess I'm not attacking. And that's always like a really just not great play pattern for cards in like any format, really. So I don't like that. Yeah. So I guess the only thing that I really think is cool about it is the enchantment build around, but like the payoff is it's just too strong, I think.
And that's not even considering that it's also an enchantment creature token, so it triggers all your constellation effects, right? So an enchantment deck, of course, you're gonna be playing tons of constellation.
Okay,
so you're like 3 mana, make a 6/6 or whatever. Also trigger all my different abilities. It's like, wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, like I didn't actually consider constellation. Just 3 mana, you get to trigger all your constellation. Even if you haven't even played an enchantment yet, I don't know how that happened, but like let's say that you played a bunch of enchantments with constellation, and then you play this, and then you activate it. It's still a 0/0 entering the battlefield, triggering your constellation. So you're still getting all the triggers. That's a little weird. Like it still technically enters the battlefield, even though it just doesn't stay there for very long.
Yeah. Now, normally in most decks, that'll go away pretty fast once you cast an enchantment with this in play. But yeah, still, you get all those triggers regardless. You also trigger any dice triggers that way, weirdly. But yeah, this card looks quite strong to me. And the rate just seems... the rate seems a little aggressive. I will note that vanilla creatures, which are what these tokens essentially are usually something we can be generous to, because like, big vanilla creatures in Commander, like it takes a lot of effort to make them strong. But the ability to make so many of them, it just means you're going to like, in the long game, like why even bother casting your spells? Just going to play this and just pump as much mana as you can into it to just make 3 6/6s a turn or whatever,
Yep, if it's big enough, for sure.
One thing I will say about the design that I appreciate is that these tokens scale over time. So you don't have to remember this one's a 2/2, this is a 4/4, this is a 5/5 or whatever. It's static, so it counts the number of experience counters you have, so it's constantly updating. Sometimes cards will make like it based on the time you do it, which is then like this huge memory issue of like trying to remember which ones are which size. So that's nice. But yeah, looks very strong overall.
Yeah, I guess actually another note about just experience counters in general, you can never get rid of them. Like you just can't get rid of counters that a player has, like same thing with poison counters and I guess energy counters too, and that can be kind of frustrating. Like I really like counterplay, having agency to deal with my opponent's stuff. If my opponent has a ton of mana, and they play this, I can't be like, remove your experience counters. Now you can't do anything. Like that's just not an option. They're just going to make a ton of stuff and you can't do anything about it.
Right. You got to play like Solemnity or something like that. I'm sure there's some cards that'll do it. Like very few and far between.
That might be the only card.
Yeah. I've played against a decent amount of Daxos decks. It's strong. It's quite strong. I agree the Enchantment Hook is nice. I know you love Enchantress decks yourself, so something you have an affinity for. But this one looks quite strong. Well, let's look at the next card, which goes in a very different direction, and I've got a little bit to say about it. We're going to look at Karlov next. Karlov of the Ghost Council is a white-black for a 2/2 Legendary Spirit Advisor. Whenever you gain life, put 2+1/+1 counters on Karlov. White-black, remove 6+1/+1 counters from Karlov. Exile target creature. Give me your takes on Karlov of the Ghost Council here.
All right. First, this card has nothing to do with the first card. So I'm not sure what kind of deck this is, but that is my first thought. And then second, like this card also has a deck building hook, which generally I like. This is a very strong trigger. This card looks really strong, actually. So you have a 2-mana 2/2, which is a fine card. And then for like doing very little work, this thing can just get very huge very quickly. And the activated ability looks super frustrating. It's semi hard to do, but like, so if you gain instances of life 3 times, you get to kill something for 2 mana, exile it even. For play pattern, this being an instant looks frustrating. Like overall, I think like all of the rates on this are just a little too strong and doesn't look that fun. I think the fun part is the game life put 2 counters on this part, but like your payoff is you get to kill a bunch of stuff and like it's just not the most interesting payoff. It's just a removal. And yeah, overall, just not a big fan, I guess.
Yeah. So I basically agree with you more or less. I feel like it is a fun, there's a lot of fun elements going on here, but it's just too aggressive of a rate of the whole package, right? Like a Johnny's Pridemate is a beloved 2-mana 2/2 that gets 1+1/+1 counter when you gain life. And this is like just 60 times better than that, right? Like how about double the counters? How about you can also kill things off? Okay, maybe not 60 times. 60 is a lot, but it has some pretty big advantages.
Yeah, there are many steps stronger than a Johnny's Pridemate.
Right, and like better than Pridemate is like fine, but this is a lot better.
Yeah.
The other issue is it kind of obviates like a lot of black-white life gain commanders, right? Like if you're going to build a white-black deck, 2 mana is about as cheap as you can make your commander be, really. And if you want to gain life, like it's going to be really hard to do better than Karlov. Do you want to talk about kind of the dangers that poses?
Yeah, I mean, like the biggest danger is like it's just like for us, it's just kind of hard to just make cool life gain commanders going forward because you always have this to compete with. Especially since we make so many commander products now, like we want to make cool and exciting cards and we want those cards to be options for players. So when cards already exist from Magic's past that are just so much stronger on rate, it's just like really hard to make those types of cards.
Yeah, and this card has been a beloved black-white commander for sure. It's very strong, but it obviates us making a lot of designs. Every time I go and make a white-black life gain commander, I'm like, okay, I gotta fight up against Karlov. How can I make my card different in some way, make it more appealing? So that's tough. And also I agree that the exiling target creature at instant speed is so easy to activate given you only need 3 instances of life gain and pretty rough to deal with. Actually, I looked in the file and Aaron Forsyth recommended adding the white-black activation on there pretty late in the game. And I'm so glad he did.
So it used to be free is what you're saying.
It used to be free, yeah, because otherwise it would have been completely brutal, right? Aaron Forsyth, that guy's smart. So one thing I want to say on this, going back to the first thing you said, so these decks, and we'll talk about the structure, I think, as we go across these, have a very interesting structure. So there's the front-facing commander, which does one theme. And then there is the backup commander, which does a different theme. And this is intentional. And they tried to find cards in the decks that weave the 2 themes together in some way. And so the idea was you could take pieces of the deck and go and build some very different stuff with them. And, that is different than what we do these days. It's not necessarily right or wrong, but I think we'll see how that has upsides and downsides as we go across the decks. Because here, like you look at Daxos and Karlov and you're like, not a lot here that's making me care about having both these in my deck, right? So then you got to find some cards that weave them together, which can be challenging. So that's kind of what was going on this time. Unique new cards in this deck. Just read off some of the cards you can expect to see here. Deadly Tempest, Grasp of Fate, Righteous Confluence, Shielded of Faith, Bastion's Protector, and Daxos' Torment. And once again, I think I mentioned this earlier too, but every deck had a card that was named after its commander and mechanics named after its commander. So Daxos' Torment, not on the same card necessarily, but Daxos' Torment is a constellation card that has Daxos' name in it. So it really ties all together what's going on with that character, which I think that's pretty cool. Like I really like that tie into the deck.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah, it's neat flavor. So looking through the deck here, we're looking through the what we got going on. You've obviously got some enchantment based stuff. You got stuff like a Johnny's Chosen as an enchantment trigger. You got Doomwake Giant, plenty of constellation stuff, even all the way down to like Dreadbringer Lampads, which gives something Intimidate. So that it's pretty far down the chain. You've got Mason Enchantress, all that kind of stuff. And then on the life gain side of things, like there's some stuff to try and to link it together. There's a couple life gaining cards. There's like Necromancer's Covenant, which gives your stuff lifelink. So it's an enchantment that gives you lifelink tokens. But it's a little tough, I'd say on that end. But in terms of an enchantment deck, it seems pretty well polished to me. There's a lot of cool enchantment trigger stuff, especially with what was available at the time. This is using stuff from the first Theros block. Thoughts on you, Melissa, taking a look through this deck list?
Yeah, my biggest thought is like I'm not really understanding the life gain aspect of this because there's just not a lot of it here. Like if I see a life gain commander, I'm going to expect most cards to just gain life. And that guy is not the face commander, so that's fine. That makes sense. But like as the alternate commander, it just looks like a weird choice.
Yeah, I mean, you've got you've got like Underworld Coinsmith, Treasury Thrall, which has Extort, so that's nice. You got, does that do it? Nope.
Well, the thing is, these two commanders are like supposed to have an option, right? It's like I have these two commanders, and as I play, I can choose which one I want to have to lead my deck. Why would I want this guy to lead my deck?
Right. Yeah, it's like if I buy this precon, I'm like, oh, I'm going to play this other guy. He looks cool. You play a game, you're like, well, that was a bad decision. I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah, just play the first guy. Like the first guy's great. Like a lot of cards trigger him.
Yeah, a lot of what we do these days is like we make the front-facing commander like take the deck in one direction, and the backup commander let you do a little bit of a different thing, but they still like both operate under the premise of like they can work together, which is really nice. Not always the case, not 100% of the time. Sometimes we have a design we really love, but a lot of the time, and that's really not happening here. So we'll have to see how that does as we go through it. In terms of an enchantment deck, I mean, you're a kind of enchantment maestro yourself, Melissa. What do you think about it on those terms?
It looks pretty solid. There's a lot of cards that I would expect to be in here. Yeah, I mean, there's also a lot of cards that just look like, not super exciting. But again, like, what is this, like the fourth commander deck's third commander? Probably fourth, right?
Fourth, yeah. We're on the fourth one.
They're still doing a ton of learning about like how to best build commander decks and like what are players looking for in 4-player games and that kind of thing. Because remember, most of the designers, they are good at making 1v1 formats. They've all they are limited masters and Pro Tour players and or like have been playing at a time when Commander wasn't really a thing. So they're still doing a ton of learning. I think like over time, the designers at Wizards have gotten so much better at designing Commander cards, but like they just weren't, was not really on their mind back then. I don't want to say that they were bad at it, but like that just wasn't their focus back then. So like you can just tell that like the decks are not the most polished. Like there's just a lot of, removal spells that are fine, but not great.
Right. Like Guild or something like that I see here. It's like, yeah, it's fine. You get exile a creature, you get a gold, but that's not really strong by any standards I'd be excited about. Even like Death Grasp is like, yeah, it's a fireball where you gain some life, I guess.
Yeah, or just weak rate creatures, for example.
Right. I will say there's some good reprints for sure. You get like Phyrexian Arena in here, which is nice. That's like a great one to pick up. You get Sigil of the Empty Throne. But anyway, yeah. So yeah, it looks like, okay, in life gain deck, oh man, it's got Dawn Glare Invoker. What a beating of a card. Of just like in limited, that's a great example of what you're talking about, Melissa, where it's like in limited, this card was like unbeatable. And in Commander, it's like, it's the 8-mana capability.
And like knowing how these design teams work, like I can kind of see what happened here. It was just like they're doing play tests and they're like, this deck has everything that I want, but it just struggles to win games. What do we do? Okay, Dawnglare Invoker. That's the card, you know?
Right. And but it turns out, you play it and it just dies really easily, or you spend your entire turn tapping one player out, and it's not as strong as it looks. All right, so it looks like some solid elements, especially in the enchantment part. A few other weak cards on the weak side. Late game thing isn't really humming here. What do you think, Melissa? Grade this deck A through F. What are we giving it?
The commanders are just too high on rate and have play pattern issues, and they don't do anything with each other. They're just like very disconnected, like as two cards in the same deck. The enchantment part of the deck's pretty cool. The life game part is not really making a ton of sense, and just some questionable card choices. So it just like seems about average. It has its pros and cons.
Yeah, I think like C+, C++ is kind of where I am too. Like there's some cool stuff going on. There's some functional enchantment things that paved the way for things later on. But the fact that both the commanders I think were probably a little bit off. Maybe Karlov more than Daxos. I mean, Daxos is strong, but maybe it ended up being okay. But the fact that late game theme is not super well represented, despite that being the backup commander. I think I give this like a C+. It's got heart. It's doing some cool stuff. C+. I think that's a C+. You give it a C, I give it C+. That's in the right space. All right, let's move on to our next deck here. Let's go into Seize Control. This is the blue-red deck. Melissa, if you were to take a wild guess of what a blue-red deck's primary theme might be, what do you think we got going on here?
Well, it probably cares about casting lots of instants and sorcery spells, like maybe like getting paid off by casting them. Yeah. That's my guess out of nowhere.
Yeah, well, what a surprise. Indeed, it does. Who could have guessed? We've got Mizzix of the Is Magnus as the commander here, right off of Ravnica. It's 2, a blue and a red for a 2/2 Goblin Wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell with mana value greater than the number of experience counters you have, you get an experience counter. Instant and sorcery spells you cast cost 1 less for each experience counter you have. Thoughts on Mizzix of the Is Magnus?
So I like the first ability, the experience ability. Like it encourages you to like play bigger and bigger spells, which is really fun. So I like that. I think the payoff is just unexciting, and strong. So like, it's not a card that really excites me. And then you just get groans from the table. Like, well, I guess you're going to be casting all these like close to free time walks and close to free, like massive card draw spells and stuff. And that's like really not the most fun or most interesting ability. I wish that part just paid you off in some like other more fun way.
I think I'm right there with you, Melissa. I really enjoy actually how the first ability requires you to keep working to make it happen. Like if you look at Daxos, you just always get an enchantment, or you always get an experience counter, no matter how expensive it is, right? You spam 1 mana cantrip enchantments, you're just going to keep getting counters. With Mizzix, you have to keep working to get those counters, which is really cool.
That is cool.
The payoff challenge is one. I personally find it kind of confusing because I think if I didn't know like Magic rules super well, I might wonder, does that count against the first part of the ability? Like I don't know. But even setting that aside, even setting that aside, it's just like, okay, so what you're telling me to do is play a bunch of spells, then just go off with really expensive spells and rituals that generate mana for me and all that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, I think you said groans from the table. You're like totally right that this is like a commander when your opponent sits down with it, you're like, oh no. All right. I know. All right. Let's buckle in, everybody.
Kill this on the spot.
Yeah, totally. And those kind of kill on the spot commanders I personally don't find that enjoyable when it's like, okay, my opponent is playing Kalia, kill it or you're doomed. Right.
But on the other hand, the kill it on the spot doesn't do anything in this case because the experience counters remain. So you just replay this again, and then you're just back to where you started.
Right. So definitely this is one that's caused some challenges over time. It is, I think there's a lot of cool stuff going on with this one. But I wish it was a different reward. I think if there's so many other rewards other than just cost reduction, maybe you could have done here. Especially with one issue we'll get into in a moment. But first, the backup commander. Let's talk about Arjun, the Shifting Flame. 4, a blue and a red for a 5/5 Sphinx Wizard. Pretty cool. Flying, whenever you cast a spell, put the cards in your hand on the bottom of your library in any order, and then draw that many cards. Pop quiz, Melissa, do you know which card this is emulating? Do you know which?
Yeah, this looks like Teferi's Puzzle Box.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Teferi's Puzzle Box or Mind Moil if you're sure. A deep cut Ravnica fan like me. But yeah, so Arjun the Shifting Flame, the secondary theme of this deck is something that meshes pretty well with spells actually, and that is drawing cards. So there's a lot of things that want you to just draw cards. So though this is an example, I think, where they combine pretty well. Thoughts on Arjun here?
Like just in a vacuum, like I am not very excited by this card. Like the rate is, kind of medium. 6 mana commanders, I think, have to do a lot to like get me excited to play them. So I don't really care for the card in that regard. And as for the ability, like, I don't know, like usually like as a player, for me, I like the planning part of the game and the sequencing and playing optimally. And this one is just like really random, because if I play a card, I don't know what's going to happen. Like I know that I'm going to lose like access to my whole hand that maybe I've planned out. You know what I mean? So like not really the biggest fan of that. But that said, what I do like about this card is that it encourages you to play like basically anything that says whenever you draw a card, do a thing. And this like enables that really well. So that's cool.
Yeah, it also it is very is it, right? It's got a kind of like random, like, okay, well, don't know what's gonna happen this time feel to it, which is nice. Yeah, this is a card. I mean, the rate on it is definitely a little on the careful side, although maybe for a card like this, that's appropriate. It can be really frustrating if it's too strong. But I enjoy this card a decent amount. I think it's like, I don't know, it seems pretty cool. Like if you want to build your deck around this and a bunch of draw triggers, you can make it work. And because you're like cycling through your cards, you can find all your best draw triggers. So I don't know. I'm pretty happy with this one, I think. This one, it's interesting because the past 3 commanders we just saw seem like aggressively costed. And this one seems like very safely costed.
Yeah. Definitely. Like this one does look kind of conservative.
Yeah. But, it kind of also just does what it says. Like you read it and you're like, we don't have a lot more to say about this card. It's like, yeah, I read the card, it does what it says. The backup commander, by the way, I didn't mention it for last deck. Last deck was Teysa, Envoy of Ghosts from Dragon's Maze, I believe. This one, the third commander, the one you can use that's a reprint, every deck has a reprint backup commander, is Melik, which is always a fun one. Notably, this deck has 14 creatures and only 14 creatures, I guess, plus the commander for 15. So it's very creature light. It's really focused on those spells. And understandably so. Some of the new cards, the unique new cards you'll find here include Aether Snatch, Awaken the Sky Tyrant, Gigantoplasm, Mizzix Mastery. So this is where that wonderful historic card showed up for all you have lost to that in historic over the past year. Mystic Confluence. We'll get to the confluences later on, but we'll have a nice little section about those. And Seal of the Guild Pact. So Melissa, I've got a question for you with this deck.
Sure.
I'm looking over the deck list right now. How do you think you should play this deck out of the box? You're enjoying, you shuffle up, you start battling. How do you win? How do you think you're going to win with this deck?
Okay. Give me a minute. I have an idea so far, but I want to see if another idea comes to mind.
Because I can definitely find cards that do it. I mean, I can, there's plenty of there's some sweet cards in here, but it looks really light on ways to just actually win a game of Magic to me. Okay. I feel like this is a deck I would play and do a bunch of sweet things and then lose, So this answer is going to be weird, but I think you win by playing a bunch of spells and then you play Mizzix Mastery with Overload and everybody doesn't want to play anymore. Mizzix Mastery. What a card that is.
I know that like that was my first experience with Mizzix Mastery. I remember playing a commander game. And I had never seen this card before because I wasn't really familiar with the new with the commander cards. And we just played this pretty long game. And then this player played this overloaded Mizzix Mastery, and I read the card and I was like, how is this a card? And then he started casting the spells, and I was like, oh yeah, all right, you got this, you win.
Yeah, it's pretty bananas. I mean, and showing up even in historic now, right? It's been it was a house. So that's, ways I see to win Mizzix Mastery, of course. You can Blatant Thievery a bunch of your opponent's stuff. You can Red Replication a bunch of your opponent's, a really strong creature to get a bunch of copies. You can Call the Skybreaker over and over again. Keep getting tokens.
Honestly, a lot of the things that you say don't sound like reliable ways to win games of Commander. They might be great ways to win games of Limited, but Commander, like a bunch of 5/5s, I'm not really sure they're going to do it.
Well, I like that you're bringing the heat today, Melissa. You're just you're not having any of it. You're like, it's been a long week. We're recording
exactly. It was a long week, so that's where we're at.
It's been a long week. It's Friday. I've been trying to train a bunch of new commander designers all week, and if any of them turn this into their homework, I would tell them to go back to the drawing board. I like where you're at. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, this is the shape of the deck looks really cool. I actually like a lot of the stuff going on here. You've got like your spell reduction spells. You've got Goblin Electromancer. You've got Talrand, really fun Spell Matters card. You know, you've got even some cool new cards like Illusory Ambusher, Charmbreaker, which is a really fun card to play with. You've got some cantrips, Preordain, Faithless Looting. You know, even have some like nostalgic cards for me, like Fact or Fiction, or even though it's not like very strong in Commander, like Urza's Rage is a card that I look at and I just get like warm, fuzzy feelings about.
Dominate is one for me.
Yeah, from Mercadian Masks, right? That was a huge block for your Nemesis, I guess.
Yep. Yeah, it was like I guess quick side note, when I really started getting into like drafting competitively, Mercadian Masks was the set.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that's a sweet card.
It's a weird one to be your like the set that gets you into competitive drafting because like it was so weak, but I was like so into Magic and I thought it was the coolest game ever. And that was the set that was out. So that was what I had. So that's what I played.
Welcome to Stinging Barriers and Troubled Healers or whatever.
Yep, you got it.
So there's like a lot of sweet stuff here for sure. But like, you know, it's like, am I going to kill you all with Comet Storm? Probably not. It just looks so hard to win a game with this deck. But, you know, it's the kind of thing where if a designer turned it over to me, I'd be like, okay, a lot of cool stuff here. Let's just cut 4 of these cards for like 4 big creatures that are flying and we'll kill you. So that's what I'm kind of thinking. Lots of cool stuff. Maybe needed a little bit more refinement. That said, I've actually never played this pre-con. I've only had it played against me. So, you know, in the games I played against it, it did not come close to winning, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm just wrong. I haven't played this deck enough. Thoughts, Melissa? Let's grade it. We've talked about the new cards, talked about the reprints a little bit. Where are we at? A through F. What do you think about this deck?
I think there are some good things going for it. Like the main thing is the theme. Like this theme is very strong. It's like, this is an instance and sorcery deck, and it's very obviously an instance and sorcery deck. There's a lot of like very exciting and powerful big instance and sorceries, which is really cool. Like a lot of X spells. So like the whole deck like is just very cohesive, especially with the commander. As for its negatives, like, I mean, we talked about the face commanders and like what my issue was with it, and the alt commander, but like they're fine. So like I'd probably do something like a B- around there.
Yeah, you nailed my thoughts exactly. I feel like this deck is a lot of cool stuff going on. It'll play functionally. The commanders are like, you know, pretty reasonable on the whole. Music's probably a little bit too strong, but like it tells you to do some cool stuff. I just feel like this is a deck that would hand a new player and they would just like be like not know what to do, or even a medium player, which is something
that's a really good point. This does look pretty hard to play.
So I look like B minus, but also there could be a range. Usually when we're making commander decks, we try and make like some that are a little easier to play and some that are a little more complicated to play. Yeah. So like this being on the more complicated end is fine. I mean, I would love playing this deck. Like Gavin would buy this deck and try to win with it. I don't know if I'd succeed, but I'd definitely try.
So same with me. This is the kind of deck that I would enjoy as well. But yeah, it does look very hard to play.
I guess like Psychosis Crawler plus Arjun will kill people. Anyway, all right, on to the next deck. So BB minus receives control. Let's go into Plunder the Graves.
All right.
Black. I don't know why I turned into a pirate. That makes no sense for black green. But hey, here we're going.
You said plunder. That's a pirate word.
It just keys my brain into it. I don't know what to tell you. So this is black green. Take a guess, Melissa. What do you think the primary theme of a black green deck called Plunder the Graves is?
It probably cares about the graveyard. You know, you just return some stuff. Yeah, just graveyard stuff.
Graveyard stuff is correct. So primary theme is graveyard recursion. Secondary theme is kind of sacrificing permanents. So
that's a super fun theme
that work well together, which is nice. Let's focus on the commander here, the front-facing commander, a name you've maybe seen before, Meren of Clan Nell Toth. She is 2 black-green for a 3/4 human shaman. Whenever another creature you control dies, you get an experience counter. So it tells yourself to die, sacrifice, etc. At the beginning of your end step, choose target creature card in your graveyard. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the number of experience counters you have, return to the battlefield. Otherwise, put it into your hand. So basically, every turn you get to raise that a creature, and if you have enough experience counters, you get to return to the battlefield. Thoughts on Meren, Melissa?
They are not very good, unfortunately. Like I think this design is not good. It's super repetitive, and you don't have to do very much work to have this card work. It just gets a creature for free. Where it goes doesn't matter. You're just getting a free card every turn. This card was strong enough to see some fringe play in Legacy. And I remember that was like my first exposure to this card was in Legacy, actually.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and it was just...
Imagine you're playing Legacy, your opponent casts this card with a new frame that you've never seen before.
I did not know what it was.
Like,
Yeah, but like in Legacy, you're getting stuff like Eternal Witness, and I don't know. It was a veteran explorer deck, so you just like ramp a bunch of stuff and get big things like a little toolboxy stuff, and generally it just returned an Eternal Witness every turn. And I remember like thinking, what is this card? Like, this card is just like outrageously repetitive. Yeah, so again, just super repetitive, and I don't like that it's just, you don't really have to do anything to get this repetitiveness. You just have to sit there and go to your end step, and it just comes back for free, you know? Like, at least give me something to work for, right? I guess you have to have it die in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, Eternal Witness, ironically, is also a thing you'll bring back with this in Commander over and over again, right? So you can't escape it. It happens all the time. Yeah, my thoughts on Meren are pretty close to yours, Melissa, unfortunately. This to me was a pretty big miss. And the thing that annoys me most about Meren is that you just always get the card back. It just seems wild to me to be like 4 mana, 3/4, raise dead every turn. Because it's going to be super loopy. You're just going to target the same thing over and over. The upgrade with your experience counters, like maybe the sacrificing creature or creature dying thing, like getting a counter is cool. Maybe it is. Maybe it's too strong. I don't know, whatever. But the fact that you like don't even care that much about it is the bummer to me. It's like, it doesn't matter. I don't care about gaining 5 experience counters. I'm just going to loop my Sakura Tribe Elder every turn, my Eternal Witness every turn into my hand, which is still plenty good. That's a big challenge to get this thing right. So I think that there's the wrong mismatch on this card of experience counter reward versus just its base stats.
Yeah, too much power in the return ability and not enough power in the experience counter ability.
I was curious about this one in particular, so I looked up the old notes on it, and believe it or not, there was a pretty big change made to this card.
Okay.
Not like late, but medium late, I would say, which was the last ability was originally a tap ability. It was a couple mana and tapping it to activate, which would have been a huge change because that means the turn you play it, you don't get it right away. You have to commit mana to do it every turn, as opposed to just like every turn rebuy a thing, which is a rough play pattern on this thing.
Any reason why it got changed? Was that said in the notes at all?
No, not really. Just that it changed. We'll never know. I thought about texting Ben to ask him, but thought we'd just leave it up to the crowd to speculate. Maybe he'll watch this episode and comment. If you're watching this, Ben, let us know. Okay, so back up. So Meren, too strong. Arguably maybe the strongest commander in this product. We'll see. Backup commander, secondary commander is Mazarek, the Crawl Death Priest. 3 black and green for an insect shaman. 2/2 flying. Whenever a player sacrifices another permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Thoughts on Mazarek?
Wow. I don't think I've ever read this card before. This card is so powerful. Big, gigantic flyer. It doesn't look gigantic. I know that it says 2/2, but it's gigantic. And so are all of your other creatures. Like, they're going to get huge. I don't know. I feel like I'm being way too negative today, to be honest. But like saying whenever any player sacrifices another permanent, like, so 2 things about that. It just really punishes opponents for just playing Magic because sacrifice effects are just so common. It's like sack your fetch land, sack your Sakura Tribe Elder. Like, these are just very common things that happen. And that just makes the opponents kind of feel bad that you're just getting this powerful of a reward. If the reward was smaller, it's a little more tolerable. Like, for example, +1/+1 counter on just this, right? Like, you can always kill this. But like the fact that it just goes on everything, it just makes it just a little bit too punishing. Like, just another thing about that, like another card that you guys are probably all familiar with that was just in the last standard that I wasn't really a huge fan of was actually Mayhem Devil. It was actually 2 standards ago. Like, I don't know time anymore. And like, that was another thing that I cared about, like, in any player doing it. And I wasn't like really the biggest fan of that tension of like being the opponent. And if you were playing a sacrifice deck and then the opponent had a Mayhem Devil out, I was just punished. Like, that didn't feel very good to me. What else do I want to say? Yeah. And then just like any permanent that's just normal game actions in Magic. Use any permanent, like I said, like with the fetch lands and just artifacts that sack for mana or whatever. So I think this card just does a little bit too much, like both in like how you get the counters and the payoff, getting the counter on everything is just too much. I said a lot about this card.
No, once again, I think I align with you perfectly. First of all, hitting your opponent's stuff is just so annoying because also you just forget about it. And then they're like, oh, you cracked your evolving wilds. Great. Counters on all my creatures. Also the reward is just, it's so like either absurd or nothing, right? It's like, okay, I went wide. I played a bunch of creatures in play. My board gets huge constantly by me sacking stuff. Or, hey, I put a counter on my creature, which is so weak. I do like a creature with whenever you sacrifice a permanent reward on it. I think that's like a really cool input. So they were headed in the right direction there. This card to me is just too much. I know that like at some point, if I remember correctly and reading through the notes, it kind of got recaptured for me. This deck was trying to go wider and, maybe that would have made more sense with that direction. But the way it ended up, this is not like a deck that goes super wide. There's not like a lot of token makers in here. You can like spider spawning or something, but you just don't get a lot of that. And as a result, the fact that it goes wide is a little misleading and maybe makes it okay actually in the biodome because you're not like putting on a ridiculous number of counters, but hitting any player is pretty frustrating to me.
Other last thing, maybe two more things, but one thing that I do want to at least say, the tracking is kind of atrocious. Like as the player of this, you have to pay close attention to what everybody is doing for the rest of the game. And that can just be very like mind numbing. You're just like, okay, got to make sure you're not cracking a fetch or got to make sure you always have to be paying attention. And that's a lot.
And it also puts the onus on all the other players to think about that too, right? It's like, I have to now think about if I'm going to crack a fetch land and I don't, because sacrificing things is so automatic, right? It's like, oh, I should not sacrifice anything because otherwise I'm going to get messed up,
Yeah. Imagine like a player's like, oh, I want to kill your guy with a damage spell. They have to look at what everybody has to make sure there aren't any onboard sac effects from all the players, right?
Right.
That can definitely be annoying.
Not to mention the Cathar's Crusade problem of everything having different numbers of counters on it, which makes it very hard to calculate. So, all right. Mazarek's a roughie. The reprint commander in here is Jared from Return to Ravnica, who's a pretty cool dude. New cards in this deck otherwise, we've got Bloodspore Thrinax, Centaur Vinecrasher, Dread Summons, Pathbreaker Ibex, Wretched Confluence, and Scourge of Nel Toth. So looking at the deck here, Melissa, so I found this one kind of interesting because the face commander is Meren, who I guess works with sacrificing or the graveyard stuff. So it's nice that it bridges the gap. But the thing I was most surprised about compared to most Golgari decks I see is there's not a lot of self-mill here, right? You have to kind of put stuff into your graveyard yourself. You've got Mulch, which is really nice. You've got Satyr Wayfinder, which is in that vein. But a lot of the work you have to do is your own, which granted it's commander. The game's going to go on a long time. You're going to build up. But like, it's very different than what I'm used to when I think about like a black-green graveyard deck.
Yeah.
I guess Grizzly Salvage too. That's one that I missed.
I guess that was their justification for the power level of Meren. Like maybe on turn 4, maybe you are not likely to have things in your graveyard yet because no one killed anything. Maybe you didn't maybe you only played one creature during the game and it didn't die. Right. But yeah, like in just a broader game of Commander where you're actually choosing what cards go in your deck, like this card is just kind of out of control. And that was not something they considered.
I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I flinched for a moment when I saw that Shriekmaw was in this deck. I missed that earlier. It's like, oh my gosh, Meren and Shriekmaw just sounds like the worst time. You're just like, in fact, it's ironically, that is one that you don't want to return to the battlefield. It's like, to me, it's like you actively almost don't want to get experience counters.
You always want it you want to play it as a sorcery.
Right. So it's like, that like even pushes it further against the like, don't get experience counters direction. That's pretty rough. Some of the sacrifice cards are a little weird. It's got like Blood Baron and Altar's Reap, which are just so far outside the range of something I would consider sort of playing. Even at the time, I think those were pretty on the weak side. Like Blood Baron, just Nantugo Husk, basically, which is, unless you're playing a lot of tokens, is not a thing I would really consider.
Like, honestly, I think that card is fine, but this does not seem like the deck for it. Like, there's just not enough tokens and disposable creatures. Like, this deck is a little bit too mid-rangey to play something like the Blood Baron.
Right. You could, like, I guess, Michael off it up. Like, you've got some options, but it's tough. Yeah, it definitely feels like I would describe this deck. Mid-range is the right word, Melissa. It's like very black-green mid-range. Just have like some mid-range level creatures. You've got your Lotleth Trolls. You've got, Indrik Stomp Howler. You've got Phyrexian Plague Lord, Acidic Slime, Vulturous Zombie, just like a lot of like mid-range stuff.
Yeah. All right. So my take is actually the two-face commanders are not very strong in this deck, right? But if you like build your own deck, they're like super, super strong, right? Because like the Meren is like, your stuff doesn't die, doesn't do anything. And the other commander is you don't have a board. So like you're not getting very many +1/+1 counters. But like, wow, in the right deck, these cards are like extremely powerful.
Having played with and against Meren in this pre-con with Meren, I can definitely confirm Meren is still absurd because you're still just going up a card every turn. But yeah, Mazarek was pretty rough to make work. I think I remember playing in a playtest. I did maybe only 1 or 2 playtests of the set. I remember playing in a playtest and someone had Mazarek and I was like, wait, what? What does this do? Yeah. Anyway, well, what do you think about this one? So we talked about the deck a little bit, talked about some of the reprints. You know, it's got some graveyardy stuff, some sack stuff, few token makers. Give me a grade on this one, Melissa.
So things that I like about it is just like, I think the synergy between graveyard and sacrifice is really cool. And that makes the deck feel cohesive. But the commanders are just like so like egregious in power level that kind of like knocks it down a little bit for me. But like, I still think it's outside of the commanders. I still think it's a cool deck. So I'd probably do like a B- here.
Yeah, I was going to say C+, B-. Like the commanders are a little on the rough side, but it's got a lot of like, if you want to play black-green mid-range, and keep in mind, things at this point in time are like, commander decks are not as well developed. We don't have a million other graveyard enablers going on. Like, this is a fine place to start, you know? It gets outmoded, I think, by the time you get to like the Sultai stuff with Sidisi and so on. A lot of these graveyard cards. But at the time, yeah, I think B-. I think that's a totally fine place to go. All right, let's go into the next deck, Wade into Battle. This is the white-red deck, and this is the one I have to admit, I literally forgot what the main theme of this deck was. I had it wrong.
Oh, no.
Most of the time, I'm like, commander decks, I know these by heart, no problem, I can run through them. Do you know what the theme of the white-red deck at Wade into Battle is, Melissa?
Well, I have the commander right here, so like I can only,
well, how about this?
I can only assume.
How about I read off the commander to you, and then you tell me what the theme is? Everyone, here's the commander. It's Kalem, Disciple of Erois, 2 red-white for a 3/3 giant soldier, double strike, vigilance. Whenever you cast a creature spell with converted mana cost 5 or greater, you get an experience counter. Kalem, Disciple of Erois, gets +1/+1 for each experience counter you have. Melissa, what do you think the theme of this deck is?
Well, I think the theme of the deck is big creatures because of the commander.
You would think that, wouldn't you? That is the secondary theme of the deck. Believe it or not, blew my mind. Literally, when I was putting together show notes for this, I had forgotten about this. The theme of the deck, Melissa, is giants. It's red-white giants.
Well, that makes sense because giants are big.
Giants are big, so that it actually melted together. Like, it wasn't like a bad realization, but it was like, holy smoke. So we made a red-white giants commander, and I just forgot about our commander deck, and I just forgot about it. Right. So this is, of course, in Lorwyn block, giants were red-white. So that's kind of what it's playing with here a little bit. Kalem, it's themselves as a giant. And yeah, I mean, as we'll get to when we look at the cards in the deck, a lot of giants in here. Basically, I think someone looked at Thundercloud Shaman and was like, I want to make this thing awesome in Commander. So they tried, but we'll get there in a little bit. Secondary theme, though, as you mentioned, though, is big creatures. So the two things gel together really well. Thoughts on this card, Melissa?
This card looks fun. Like, the rate's like a little strong because like 4 mana 3/3 double strike is just, I think it's like a little bit too over for what we would usually print. And also it gets bigger based on stuff you do in the game. But I think the design is actually like really fun. It's like rewarding playing like really cool gigantic creatures like angels and dragons stuff, which is like really fun. And building up a big double striker is fun. So not a lot of like negatives about this. I guess I'll be like on theme and be a little negative and say at least something negative.
The title of this episode is going to be Melissa Hates Everything.
Like, it's, I think, very hard for decks like this to succeed in Commander. It's really hard to jam a bunch of 5 mana creatures in your deck, you know? So, like, it's hard to work. That said, if it does work, like, I think it's a really cool deck, but it's a tough one.
And I don't mind pushing a deck out that tries to make a theme like this work every now and then. Like, it's a very noble goal. And in some play groups, I think this kind of thing will work out well. Also, like, some people just want to play big creatures and smash, nothing wrong with that. My only note on this card really, I think, is that the vigilance feels a little off to me. My guess is it's probably there because like someone's like, what's right about this card? And they're like, oh, it's got to have vigilance. Yep. But a huge creature that can block and attack can be a little frustrating sometimes. Yep. Other than that, though, looks pretty cool. I will note that originally this card actually did care about giants. It was whenever you cast a giant, you get an experience counter. But ultimately, Ben decided, probably for the better, honestly, that that would just be so narrow that you want to make it more applicable and open-ended.
Yeah, I think this is a far cooler card than a giant version of this card. And like to your point about vigilance, like while I do agree with you, like this type of deck is so vulnerable to removal and sweepers. Like I don't hate that vigilance is on this because like a sweeper is crippling against a deck like this, like you really just need a high power level for this type of deck for a commander.
Yeah. Red white, I'm happy to give boost to, especially red white big creatures deck, right? So looking at the next commander here, Anya, Merciless Angel. This is 3 red white for a 4/4 flying angel. So it fits in that big creature theme we got going on. Anya, Merciless Angel, gets +3/+3 for each opponent whose life total is less than half their starting life total. So in Commander, you're going to need to get them down to 19. As long as an opponent's life total is less than half their starting life total, Anya has Indestructible. So pretty easy to get this thing, or not easy, but in the mid game at least, it's pretty easy to get this thing down, have it be Indestructible and a 7/7 or what have you. Thoughts on Anya?
It looks kind of feast or famine. Like you're either like not very happy or you have it all, like, like this thing can be at 369. So, why am I having a hard time? Oh, because it's Friday at it's Friday after work. No wonder I'm having a hard time doing math, but like, this thing can be a 13/13 probably and Indestructible. Like you just are golden if it's on, but when it's not on, you're just not feeling very good. So, like, and there's nothing in between, which is like my biggest gripe about it, like I wish it at least did something for me, like while I was working, like maybe it helps me get there,
Well, it's a 4/4 flyer, I guess. So it's got that going for it. But I do agree that it's weird this is a commander that you don't want to cast on turn 5 a lot of the time. You really want to wait until you've knocked at least one player down to half their starting life total and then slam this thing down on the table. Because if you play it earlier, you're just playing a bad Sarah Angel. That's, and that's like not winning any awards.
Right.
But then once it's out, it gets pretty strong. It does do a weird thing, I think, where it encourages other players to kill the weakest player. Because like if one player is beaten down really early and at 19 life or below, a lot of the times people will be like, okay, well, they're low. I'm not going to go kill them right now. But when this card's around, it's like, oh, I actually need to go kill the player who's weak because it's going to pump up Anya and make it really hard to kill and deal with, which I think is a net negative of the game usually, of just like, letting the player who's like really far behind, just kicking them further. But that's a minor, I would say.
Looking at this deck list, I feel like this player is going to be the one that's most far behind.
Well, you are bringing the fire today, Melissa. I absolutely love it. The reprint commander, just to go into that really fast, is Gazelle, Blade of Gold Knight. That's 4 red, white for the angel from Avacyn Restored.
Oh, I have a fun fact about this one. This card. I actually played one of this card in my Pro Tour top 8 deck of Pro Tour Gatecrash 2013.
This is your 5-color deck, right?
It was 4, but yeah, it was mostly Bant Splash Red. And the only red card in the deck was actually Gazelle. But the red splash was for Kessig Wolf Run, which is a land. And you just like use the red for the activation of that land.
I don't know if I've ever told you the story, Melissa, but when we were working on designing Return to Ravnica and Gatecrash, I built a 5-color control deck with like Sphinx's Revelation and the works and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And no one else in development at the time had built a deck like this. And I kept winning with it, but a lot of people were like, nah, whatever. That's just Gavin's like weird 5-color deck. So when you top-aided that Pro Tour, I felt so validated.
Oh, nice.
So I was like, oh, my deck worked. It actually got all the way there. And my list, I still have it somewhere. I think the only difference is mine was 5 colors because I was playing Rakdos's Return or something like that. But yeah, reasonable. There's a little connection there. I saved the printout copy of my deck. I still have it somewhere of like the 5-color deck because I was so proud. Yeah.
I wonder if I should save my old decks. I never do. I just don't like clutter. But the upside is if I save the deck, when the cards actually come out, I can just like show the world, hey, this is what I played a year ago. And I think that's actually really cool.
I think it'd be funny to go spell slinging at like a Magic Fest someday. Once it's safe to do so, etc. Where I brought an all playtest card deck and I was like, all right, here's my spell slinging deck. Come play against Standard a year ago, and a few cards are different, and just see how people receive it. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be a little weird, but
yeah,
but like, interesting, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, here's what it's like to play against no art cards. Anyway, so there's Gazelle. Just want to run through some of the unique new cards. We've got Dawnbreak Reclaimer, Dream Pillager, Kalem's Captain, Fiery Confluence, Blade of Selves, and Magus of the Wheel. The first, by the way, this is where the Magus Super Cycle started. It all started right here. I believe the plan in the first set was actually to do 5 of them, a cycle across all the decks. They only kept 1, Magus of the Wheel, and then, of course, the future ones will show up in later sets. We don't talk about that too much today, because what I really want to get into right now, Melissa, is you had a very strong reaction to this deck list as you were looking through it. So while you're there, tell me about what you're thinking, because it sounds like you have some opinions.
It's mostly just kind of clunky. Like there's a lot of just very expensive things, and I mean that makes sense because the theme is convert a mana cost 5 or greater in the commander. But it just looks like you have a high likelihood of getting just non-functional hands of all lands and 6-drops. Like the amount of 5+ cards is just very high. And I don't really think those decks are set up to succeed in Commander. You need a high amount of ramp. And this is red-white in 2015. That wasn't really too much of a thing back then. And then looking at the artifacts, there's some artifact ramp, but I don't think there's really enough to justify playing all these expensive cards. The interaction's low. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like there's 9 mana rocks. I guess 8 if you don't count Dreamstone Hedron, which is calling that a mana rock.
Yeah, well, that's just a 6 mana card, so it's hard to really count that as a mana rock, because that just is another the opening hand that's all and 6-drops. Hey, that's a 6-drop,
Right. So you've got 8. You got 8 other mana rocks here. You've got Urza's Incubator, which is definitely a card you want to draw every game, and that Stink Drinker are going to discount your giant significantly. But I totally agree that a lot of the times you're going to open a hand here and be like, oh, well, these don't do anything, and then make things even worse. You've got cards like Fall of the Hammer, which is, by the way, very weak to start with. But second of all, you have to have a big creature in play for it to even do anything, which is tough.
It's flavorful, but it's not the most functional card in a deck like this, and it's just not a constructed card. It's a great limited card.
This looks like a deck someone would show me, a newer Magic player would show me. I'd be like, your deck looks awesome for what you're trying to do and for your play group, but we got to cut out it's like the opposite of the blue-red deck problem. That deck was cut 5 cards, put in 5 big creatures. This deck's cut 5 cards, put in 5 cheap spells,
Yeah.
Especially because some of the big stuff they're playing is just not that strong.
Yep.
Right. There's some Stone Shock Giant, which is that is a reach for a giant. It's a 5 mana 5/4 with 8 mana monstrosity 3 and lets you falter, which is a toughie. Also Dawnglare Invoker shows up here, so I guess they're just big on Dawnglare Invoker.
It seemed like they just were really into ways to end games,
which is important.
This is a good way to kill one person. Good is a stretch, I guess, but you get what I'm saying. This is a functional way to kill serviceable way to kill one person. Yeah, maybe that's the word I want to use.
One card I do want to call out that I noticed in this deck list is Breath of Daragaz, which I'm surprised I have never seen played against me in Commander. Right, it's 1 red, deal 1 damage to everything, or kicker 2, deal 4 damage to everything. So it's a pretty cool sweeper that some of the more aggressive red decks might play.
I remember drafting very highly. Yeah, I kind of forgot about this card. These days for Standard, we would not really make a card at this rate. This is a pretty strong rate, especially at uncommon. Compare it to Storm's Wrath, which is a 2/2 sorcery that does 4 to all creatures. This doesn't hit flyers, which is a big deal, but uncommon, flexible mana cost and low color requirements, right? That's just not really something that we would do for Standard anymore. So that's kind of interesting to remember that card.
For sure. Yeah, I haven't seen that one in a while. Otherwise, it's got a couple individually cool new cards. Blade of Selves is an awesome one. Big fan of Blade of Selves. This gives a quick creature Myriad, which we'll get to later. It's got the Magus. And even some uncommons are cool, like a Rescos Explorer. But yeah, this is a rough one for sure. All right, let's go on to the final deck here. This is blue-green.
We didn't give it a grade.
We got to give it a grade. Excuse me. Wow, I was so worried, Melissa, about the grade we're going to give this deck. I'm like, I can't.
It's not going to be that bad.
Okay, all right. Melissa, sorry. I tried to go into the last deck too quickly. Grade this deck. Where are we at?
All right. Like, I know that I was really negative, but like, I think this deck does have a noble goal. It's like a great like deck for the player who just wants to play a bunch of big creatures, and the creatures are very iconic. The theme is here, like, you know, giants. I don't know how cool giants are. Like, giants is not really like what I would call like, oh, hey, this is an iconic creature type that people want to play a deck in. But like, looking at like, you know, angels and dragons, like these are like pretty awesome, iconic creatures that I'm excited to play. I just think the deck just has like, you know, just like mana issues and just kind of curve issues, I guess. So like, that's like pretty much my gripe with it. But I like the goal of the deck. But I don't think I can give it like the average C grade. I think it has to be like just a little lower. So I think I'm on like D plus C minus or something.
Oh no. Poor way to
It's not that bad. I didn't give it an F. Come on.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, to me, this deck looks like it was very ambitious. And to me, this is a failure of the failures of this deck to me are a vision design. Just because I think it's like they tried to make giants work as a theme, and it just wasn't really possible to make it work as a theme. At least if these are going to be the cards you're going to make. Maybe if you make a lot more Giants Matter cards, maybe you get there with the number of new cards you have. But it's like, you know, just inherently, if you're going to build a Giants deck, you're going to play a lot of big creatures that are clunky. And at this point in time, there especially isn't a lot of support for that. So I feel like this is one that if someone pitched it to me in Vision Design, I'd just be like, there's not enough support for it unless we're really going to go whole hog on our new cards doing it. And then a lot of the new cards just don't support the theme, right? There's a lot of cards that are just generically big creatures, or, you know, just even just other cards like Rite of the Raging Storm. So
I have a fun fact when you're done.
Yeah, I'm just going to say that, you know, they took a valiant effort. It was very noble. I understand how they got here, but I just feel like there was some development failures for sure of maybe not putting in more small creatures. But ultimately, the deck's premise at the time was just flawed in trying to make this work. I think even now, today, you could maybe try and build a red-white big creature deck, but it'd have to look a lot different from this, and you would still need to use a lot of the new cards for support. And this was 7 years ago or whatever. I can't believe I'm saying that. This was 6 years, I guess 6 years ago, really. But still, it's a long time ago. And Melissa, what were you going to say?
So I was on the set design team for Call Time that also had a giant theme. And this was another thing that we struggled with for Blue Red, which was the giant limited archetype. It had like the same kind of issues of like, hey, this deck is like super clunky. Like it's asking you to play 5+ mana creatures, and like in limited, you can't really like justify putting that many cards in your deck to like have it feel like a giant tribal deck with payoffs. So like we ended up adding changelings as a way to like kind of make the deck more like functional as a giant deck. Like, I don't know, that might be kind of a cop out. It's like, oh, how do we make giants work? Oh, we have changelings at lower mana costs, you know? Like that might be a little weird. I don't know.
This deck has Torian Mauler, so they were trying. I think. I mean, there's so many things I like about this deck. I do like the commanders a decent amount. Like Kalem seems pretty cool. You know, even the backup commander, Anya doesn't seem that tough. But so much about this is it's in a really rough spot. I just feel like this is a theme that we probably shouldn't have done. I'm going to give it like a D plus, maybe. It's tough. It's really tough. Not because of the commanders, ironically. It's the opposite of the other ones. Just the rest of the deck is so hard to make work. Although I will say, if you're new and you're getting into Commander and you're like, I want a big creature deck, this will have you covered, right? So this is what I'm really curious about. Maybe there's some huge fans of this deck out there. I'm not a Timmy. I'm definitely not a Timmy player. So like maybe someone out there who is like, no, this was awesome. But for me, that's what I give it. Okay, let's go into the final deck here. Swell the Host, which is kind of a weird name for a deck. But anyway, Swell the Host. Front-facing commander. We got Azuri, Claw of Progress. Seeing Azuri again, this I remember being really cool to me because we saw Azuri on Meren. He was great, wonderful, happy part of the Meren Resistance. And then, we see him here and he's now Phyrexianized. Whoopsie doopsie.
Oh no, that's so sad. Poor Azuri.
Poor Azuri. But not too poor because his card turned out pretty sweet. 2 green-blue for a 3/3 elf warrior. Whenever a creature with power 2 or less enters the battlefield under your control, you get an experience counter. At the beginning of your combat step, put X +1/+1 counters on another target creature you control, where X is the number of experience counters you have. Thoughts here on Uzuri, and can you identify the theme?
So my guess on the theme is +1/+1 counters.
Nailed it.
Am I close? Oh, great. I did it. And as for the card, overall, it looks pretty fun. Like big creatures and combat is a pretty fun thing to do. This card is saying cast a bunch of creatures or maybe make tokens. Maybe you're just supposed to play a bunch of tokens with this. I am surprised it doesn't say non-token or anything, because like doing something like, I don't know, what are you doing in green blue? But if there's like a mass token producer or something, that just seems like a too easy of a way to get experience counters. But like generally, like this card looks pretty fun. Like beginning of combat, you just get to make a gigantic thing is cool. So I think, I'm going to go with this as a cool and fun design.
Yeah, I really like this. All the reasons you said. I would put non-token on it, but that's an oversight I'm willing to forgive, especially at the time. We haven't seen as many iterations on token-based decks maybe back then. The thing I love about it is it tells you to play a bunch of cheap creatures, which is pretty uncommon in Commander and a very interesting thing to build around. Unlike, you still have to cast your cards, unlike the 5+ CMC theme, which is tough to work, but it encourages you to play cards in your deck you might not otherwise play, which is really nice. And instead of rewarding you with card draw like Edric or something, which is all about just cantripping out, this is like, no, then you're going to go battle with your small creatures. So I think this card's pretty cool. Really like this one. All right, so Melissa, the fun basic commander is about +1/+1 counters. If you were green blue and you were a +1/+1 counter deck, what would you choose as your backup commander? What would your backup theme be? Any thoughts?
Well, all right. Like I'm sure the answer is going to be something ridiculous, but
you're correct.
But if I was like designing the deck or whatever, I would want it to care about +1/+1 counters in a different way. So instead of casting creatures, like some other like enabler or like just some other way to care about the creatures to just like give you a different build around, and just like have a different experience. Yeah, so that's what I would do, but I have no idea what the backup commander does.
Or like tokens, I could also see being a thing, right? Because that works with the face commander. Maybe that's what you're trying to do. Nope. We got something very different for you. Blue-green snakes. The backup is snakes.
Oh, is it Cassetto or something? Is that the guy?
That's right, Cassetto, the Orochi Archmage. Nice. 1 green blue for a 2/2 snake wizard. Green blue, target creature can't be blocked this turn. If that creature is a snake, it gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Thoughts on Cassetto and snakes?
First, I'll say my fun fact, and then I'll read the card because I don't really remember. So I was on game nights like years ago, and it was me, the professor, Jimmy, and Josh. And the professor played the Cassetto deck. And I remember before we recorded, we like just played some for fun games. And like the professor kept killing me with poison. And I remember just getting like super salty, being like, there are not even that many poison creatures in the deck. And you seem to always have this like turn 1 or turn 2 poison. And then like you play this commander and kill me. What's going on? Thankfully, that did not happen in the recorded game. But I just remember like, it was just like a weird, funny thing that happened.
Yeah, I guess this is very good with like Blight Mamba or whatever, right? Which is a 1/1 snake with infect. So, sick combo. So thoughts on Cassetto and snakes? All right,
let's see. I like supporting different unique tribes. So that's cool. So I like the goal of just having a snake tribal card. Like this card has some pretty obvious play pattern issues. For 2 mana, you just get to give something +2/+2 at any time. That's just like not really a very fun ability to play against and not very interesting. Like the more interesting thing is the can't block, but this card is kind of more telling you to use this as a combat trick. There are probably not that many snakes that exist in Magic, which justifies like what this card is doing and its power level. But as we make more Magic cards, there's going to be more and more snakes, right? So then like cards like this end up being problematic down the line. So not the biggest fan.
Yeah, it can also, what I think is interesting is it can target itself. So it, on one hand, that's nice because it makes it self-contained, so you don't need a million snakes. But on the other, it tells you, hey, you don't actually have to put snakes in your deck if you want to just pump me up and attack with me every single turn. which I guess is not that strong of a commander, but still kind of funky. To me, I think a snake commander is cool. It's a noble goal. I actually much prefer it as a backup commander, so it kind of sends you in a different direction as opposed to like trying to pay you off on the face of it. It's just it's a strange thing to combine with Azuri to me, I guess. I guess some snakes are smaller, but there are so few snakes in Magic. I don't know.
Oh, is Azuri a snake?
Azuri's not a snake. Azuri is an elf.
So it does not work.
Does not work.
And it doesn't even have CMC 2 or less to work with Azuri, right?
It's true. Now, there are some snakes that are CMC 2 or less. We'll get into those here in a moment. I agree the instant speed nature on the activation is a little rough. It's also so weird to me that it's like sometimes you want to make your thing unblockable and bigger, but other times you just want to like have them block and then eat their creature in the middle of combat with the +2/+2.
And they probably won't block anyway.
Combo.
So then they just like don't block anyway, and then you don't pump, and then you just like cast your other spells. So it's like pseudo unblockable because of threat of activation.
Yeah, so that's a little strange to me. But they're trying to make a different sideways theme as the backup commander. I totally buy that. Just to run through the third in command, that's Prime Speaker Zagana, really cool card from Gatecrash that I like a lot. That's a great one here. Unique new cards, I'm just going to read them off. We've got Arachnogenesis, Azuri's Predation, Scythe Claw, Synthetic Destiny, Verdant Confluence, and Command Beacon. So let's take a look into the deck list here, Melissa. So we do have some snakes. There are some new snakes that made for this. There's Broodbirth Viper as a snake with Myriad. Some of the returning snakes we've got are like Lore Scale Coatl, which does do +1/+1 counters as a snake, which is pretty nice. So they did find a throughput there. Sakura Tribe Elder, a snake. Patasia Viper, actually totally sweet. I've always loved Patasia Viper. Uran Viper. So we're trying to make that side of things work. Even the highly thematic snake form, which you wouldn't actually target your own thing with, but is really funny to me. Cobra Traps. So there's some snaky stuff going on. In terms of counter payoffs, there's not a lot of stuff that actually pays you off for having +1/+1 counters, which surprises me, other than just I've got a big creature now. You got like Chameleon Colossus, which helps there a little bit. Forgotten Ancient, which I guess is kind of nice. But this looks like a pretty functional blue-green deck. And I do like that it's not just blue-green ramp, right? It's so easy to make the 67th blue-green ramp deck. And making a blue-green deck that requires you to go in a slightly different direction playing creatures is kind of cool. I don't know. What do you think about this one?
Yeah, just looking at the list, it just looks like a fun deck. You have your creatures with ETB triggers, get some value. It looks like it plays like a very mid-range game. So it looks overall pretty fun. Yeah, I mean, it might be a bit on the weak side because like it looks light on interaction, probably a little light on card draw. Like maybe the ETBs make up for it. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this deck is on the weaker side. On the flip side, though, at least it's on the weaker side in what I would call a fun way. In the red-white deck, it might be on the weak side, and you just have a handful of like 7 drops you can't cast.
Yeah, at least you can cast your spells, right? Like
exactly, right?
You can cast your Loaming Shaman on turn 3, even if you don't want to use the trigger, right? Like at least you can like actually play a game of Magic.
Yeah, you got to save Loaming Shaman to get rid of their Meren cards. Oh wait, you can't because Meren returns at the end of their turn, so you never have a window to do it. Sorry, I'm just angry about Meren. And Azuri also can like, it's pretty easy for Azuri to start putting like 4, 5, 6 +1/+1 counters on a creature in the mid game. So like you can kill people that way pretty reasonably too. So that's kind of cool. I do want to tell a story about one card in this deck really fast.
Right.
So Command Beacon. This is a card I think a lot of folks know. This is a land. It taps for colorless. You can tap and sacrifice Command Beacon to put your commander from your hand into the command zone. This card was actually redesigned extremely late because originally what it did was 2-tap sacrifice, search your library for your commander and put it into your hand.
Oh,
it was meant to be a land that fought the tuck rule because it used to be you could have commander shuffle back into your library as a way to deal with them. And extraordinarily late in the design of this product, we got word that the rules committee was going to change the commander rules to get rid of the tuck rule. And suddenly our card made no sense. Yeah. So we had to come up with something very, very, very late to fix it. And honestly, I'm pretty happy with Command Beacon. I think it's a cool card. So that was a great late solve by Ben here.
Yeah, it's cool. I wish the card exiled, but like the effect is cool if it happens exactly once. But if you can like abuse it in some way, then I like it a lot less.
Right. Like Titania back your Command Beacon makes it a little bit too easy, for example. But yeah, okay. Well, so that's kind of what's going on in this deck. A lot of fan favorites here. Mystic Snake, one of my personal favorite cards that's hanging out. Maybe a little on the weak side, though. What do you think, Melissa? What would you grade this deck?
Like things that are going for it is it's just like a fun, solid deck to play. And like, as we talked about, it's a little weak. I think both commanders are functional and fine. The snake has play pattern issues, but Magic was a different time back then for commander, I feel. I think I would do like a C+.
C+? I'm going to, I think this is the first time today where I'm really going to fall on a different side of the spectrum. I'm going to give this a nice B+, I think. This deck looks pretty fun. Like, Azuri is a cool commander. It looks fun to play with. It's not perfect, but by like the terms of, can I play this deck, do cool stuff, and even if I don't win, feel like I got like close or got to eliminate a player or something, like, I feel like I can do that. Also, some of the new cards are pretty sweet. Like, I think not only is Azuri cool, but Arachnogenesis is a card that I really like. Spider Fog was the playtest name for that card, appropriately so.
Makes sense.
So yeah, the story checks out on that one. So like, that's a really cool card that I like seeing here. Even like the weaker side reprints, like Desert Twister coming back was like a cool moment of like, oh man, Desert Twister is back. That's pretty cool. So this card has this deck has a special place in my heart. I'll give it a nice B+. Certainly not cracking A, but I do like a lot of things going on here. It looks fun. Nothing else, it looks fun if low power.
Yep. Light on synergy too, which is like kind of what will knock it down for me. But yeah, overall fun.
Yeah. I like snakes probably in a disproportionately high amount. So, all right. So it was different ratings from the two of us, but kind of covered what was going on there. Okay. So those are our 5 decks. Now let's get into the cycles. And there are a few ones here to talk about.
All right.
First one I want to talk about, we don't need to go super in depth because we've talked about it a lot already, but is experience counters. So we had a cycle of experience counter commanders. We've covered these pretty in depth at this point. Mostly I just want to ask you, Melissa, what do you think are the odds we'll see experience counters again? And what do you grade it as a mechanic?
So like, I wouldn't say it's out of the question for it to come back. I would like want to overhaul the mechanic a little bit. Like, I think you just have to be very careful, like with the problem of like experience counters never go away. And it just kind of, it just kind of makes it feel bad to even kill the commander in the first place. So I would want to like address those issues before like having the mechanic come back.
So you would give it a low rating, probably like a low grade.
Low-ish. Like I don't think it's out of the question because I think we can get it right. I just don't really think that this iteration was necessarily correct.
I think that's a totally solid take. I think I am a lot more bullish on experience counters. To me, I think there are ways to do them right. The challenge is, like a lot of new things. We talked about energy earlier in this episode, even. It's so hard to get it right the first time. And I think there are ways you can put in activations or add tap abilities to cards so it takes time to get them back online, or some things to help mitigate what's going on here. I also thought back in Commander Legends 1, we even talked about doing like having experience counters granted by other cards. So imagine you're doing like a booster set of like Commander Legends or whatever, and you have your creatures give you experience counters that then a commander can harness. There's like some fun, like linear play there. I know it's a little parasitic, but there's some fun stuff you can do. I liked when Kelsine, I think that's their name, showed up in a Korea commander as an experience counter card that was like a one-off. That was kind of cool. But I do agree we have to be very careful with it. And the fact players can't interact with them is a really big challenge. Like people don't like that. We know from, in fact, the players get annoyed when they can't interact with counters. And the fact they scale almost so rapidly in the late game is a challenge. And then to top it off, the problem of that often the right thing to do is just jam it, click the button as many times as you can, as quickly as you can, and then reap huge rewards is a huge issue. So, if I were to grade the mechanic, I would give it like probably, I don't know, maybe like a B- as a mechanic, but maybe like a C- or D+ in execution.
Yeah. Actually, that's kind of where I was at too. Like the mechanic has potential. I don't think this execution is like its full potential. So, yeah. So maybe we'll get there someday. But I agree. There's a lot of challenging things to work through here, and some of these cards, as we saw, work better than others. Let's move on to another cycle, one we haven't talked about at all yet, but I'm excited to get into. These are the confluences. So there are 5 of them. I'll read them off. Basically, the way these work is there are instants or sorceries, and they have 3 modes on them, and you get to do 3 of the modes, but you get to choose how many of each of them you do, and you can choose the same mode multiple times. So to just read you off an example here, I'm going to bring up the white one, which is called Righteous Confluence. So Righteous Confluence
reads, where are you? Where are you hiding, Righteous Confluence? Did you know, fun fact, did you know that the white-black deck has no instance in it? I was like looking through the instance list.
That is so unfortunate.
Where are you? Okay, here we are, Righteous Confluence. 3 white sorcery. Choose 3. You may choose the same mode more than once. Create a 2/2 white knight creature token with vigilance. Exile target enchantment, or you gain 5 life. So you can make 3 knights. You can gain 15 life. You can make 1 knight and gain 10 life. You can do 1 of each, whatever you choose. So those are the modes for the white one. Just go through all of them really quickly. You have, of course, Mystic Confluence as the blue one. This one is pretty well known, I would say. This one, the 3 modes are counterspell unless they pay 3, return target creature to its owner's hand, or draw a card. So worst case, it's just 5 mana, draw 3, which is never too shabby. The black one we have is Wretched Confluence, which is target player draws a card and loses 1 life. Target creature gets -2/-2, or return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. I always thought it was kind of funny personally that there's 2 5-mana confluences that both have draw a card as a mode.
Hey, they're a little different. One says target player.
It is true. You can target your opponent if you want to help them out or make them lose 3 life, I guess. So if you're in a very generous mood, you can do that. In red, we've got Fiery Confluence, 2 red. Deal 1 damage to each creature, or 2 damage to each opponent, or destroy target artifact. So you deal 6 to each opponent if you want, which is pretty sweet, or 3 to each creature, or split it up however you want. And then finally, rounding things out in green, we've got Verdant Confluence. And Verdant Confluence reads 4 GG, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature, return target permanent card from your graveyard to your hand, or search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffle. Those are the confluences. Thoughts on these, Melissa?
I think they're great. I really like them. I like that you have lots of choices, lots of ways to play them. Like, it's hard to even play the same one twice, because like depending on the game state, it could just do something totally different. So they're pretty cool. So here's like one thing that might be somewhat of a hot take, but like I think these should have been in standard. Like these look like really fun standard cards, and they're pretty spiky. Like competitive players like choices. These have lots of choices. These remind me of a lot of the commands which we've had iterations of in standard before. A lot of these effects are pretty standard pointed effects as well, So like I think they're very cool. Like we've seen some of them in cube before as well. Like the blue one and the red one are like cube staples these days. So like great designs, I think, but I just like they seem better suited for 1v1 play or standard play than commander play, I think.
They're almost too good of designs, I guess is what you're saying here. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of confluences too. I love them. Takes some trickiness, a lot of knobs to turn to get the modes right and to find the right modes, but they're pretty fun. I actually tried to do a cycle of multicolored confluences in Commander Legends, which did not end up working out, but I would love to do those. I know that Kaya's Guile, I think, from Modern Horizons 1 was originally a confluence, so definitely love for those. I think these are could totally see doing them again, and I give them a solid A. I think they're just awesome. They're super fun. They were called Super Charms in playtesting. That was their playtesting.
Nice. Yeah.
And I love Charms. Right? Yep. So they're great.
Yeah. I did not say my grade, but I would have given them an A as well. Like, I just think they're just good designs.
Melissa hates everything except confluences. So that's what we'll make the title. It's all good. No, I won't actually do that. Don't worry about it.
I don't mind.
The only note I want to give is I looked it up because the white one I think came in a little bit weak. And unfortunately, what I learned is I wish that we hadn't made this change. There was a latest change made on the gain 5 life mode. Originally, it was kill a creature with power 4 or greater, which would have definitely made that card show up a lot more.
Definitely, yeah. Having designed commands before, they are very tough to design because they are part of a cycle, and we have to be very careful not to have the same ability on any of them. For example, as you can see here, the Mystic Confluence and the Wretched Confluence both have draw cards, sort of. They're a little different, but working on the Strixhaven ones, that was very challenging because anytime one of us suggested a change, it was just can't, the other one does that,
Right.
or like can't because of this reason. It was just just so hard because there are only so many abilities that you can choose. I did learn that putting gain life as one of the modes was like probably not the way to go. It's just like generally weak and unexciting and might not justify its own mode. I don't know. Especially in Commander, like it's unfortunate that this went to gain 5 life because you're not going to gain 15 life.
I wonder how much of it was because of the Karlov wanting you to gain life, and it's kind of like a not great reason. But anyway, yeah. So Confluence is great. Thumbs up from both of us. Let's move on to another mechanic, Myriad. So the way Myriad works is when you attack one opponent with a Myriad creature, you create a token that's attacking each other opponent, and then the tokens go away at the end of combat. So I'll give you a great example here. Herald of the Host. It's a 3 white, 4/4 flying vigilance. So Sarah Angel stats. And when it has Myriad, so whenever it attacks for each opponent other than defending player, you get a token that's a copy of that creature tapped and attacking that player or a planeswalker that player controls. Exile the tokens at end of combat. So in white, we've got Herald of the Host, which is that 4/4 flying vigilance I just mentioned. In blue, we've got a 5 mana 3/3 that whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. So maybe you get to draw a bunch of cards. Snakes love drawing cards. It's funny, it's a snake to me. Good old Ophidian. There's Banshee of the Dread Choir, which is a 5 mana 4/4. Whenever it hits an opponent, that player discards a card. So kind of the inverse. There is Warchief Giant, which is a 5 mana 5/3 haste Myriad. It's a giant also. So you get that going for the giant stack. Come down, smash, deal some damage. And then breaking the cycle of being all 5 mana, we've got the big one, the 7 mana green one, Caller of the Pack, which is an 8/6 trample with Myriad. Thoughts on Myriad? I guess so the one fun fact I'll mention is the playtest name was Mirror Blitz, which I thought was kind of a cool playtest name.
That's a cool
Thoughts
name.
on Myriad, Melissa?
All right. First, I'll talk about the mechanic in general. Yep. I like the mechanic. Like Commander games are sometimes hard to win, and this helps. Like this does like so much more damage in a 4-player game, right? So I like that. And another thing that I like about it is sometimes you just don't know who to attack. And this, you don't have to make any decisions. Everybody's getting attacked. And I think that's kind of great, especially in complex Commander games where there's just so much going on and you have so many decisions. Well, with Myriad, I mean, it's sort of a decision. You have to like actually choose a person, but you really have no decision. Everybody's getting attacked. So that's
it's like, oh, I didn't want to attack you, Melissa, but like I just have to. The card says I have to. So, just how it goes.
Yeah. So I like the mechanic. I would give the mechanic, like in general, like probably an A. I think it's a solid mechanic. As for the individual cards, like I think the executions are like just a little bit on the weak side. Like these are mostly just vanillas or French vanillas. Like you can just do so many cool things with Myriad, like ETB triggers, because you get like all those ETB triggers when they come into play. And that is, I think, super cool. Some of these do have combat damage triggers, but they're just on vanillas. Like it's going to be hard to just attack, right? With just a vanilla, So I sort of like what they did with those, but the rates are just a bit on the weak side for those two, the black and the blue. And the green, red, and white they're just like weak cards. Unfortunately, they just look like something that I want to play in like Commander Legends or something, because they just look like more like limited cards, like Conspiracy or something. It looks like a great mechanic for that, but not so much in my Commander constructed game.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Melissa. And I pretty much align with you exactly. For me, the mechanic's a solid A. It plays great. A lot of cool stuff you can do. A little bit of a weird design space in like you can't really write attack triggers on these because they don't actually work, but you can write ETBs, you can write some other stuff. Yeah. And just these designs look on the weak side, but they're an uncommon cycle. So like making them a little bit weaker is reasonable. So yeah, I think they just ended up a little weak, but cool. I think I give these both an A and something that I would be happy to have return again. And I am not afraid to make more Myriad cards. Also, I guess we can't forget about Blade of Selves, the equipment which grants Myriad, and that card is awesome. So huge fan of Blade of Selves.
Yep.
Okay, so that's all.
Yep, Blade of Selves is sweet, actually.
Yeah, Blade of Selves is
put
like,
on my ETB thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, you didn't give me the cool ETB thing? Well, I've got a solve for that.
Yep.
No problem. Okay, going on to so that's all the cycles. I just want to mention there's a few uncommon cards that we didn't talk about anywhere else. We're not going to talk about each of them. I'm going to read them off here. There's a West Coast Explorer, Mirror Match, Illusory Ambusher, Corpse Augur, Thief of Blood, Meteor Blast, Rite of the Raging Storm, Great Orc Guardian, Skullwinder, and Sandstone Oracle. And the reason why this is important, and it kind of keys into a story from a previous episode, is you probably haven't done the math and looked at that spoiler sheet. But if you did, you notice that every color gets 3 uncommons, the Myriad card plus 2 others, except for white, which only gets 2, and then there's an artifact. Well, what happened here in the story I want to tell is Sandstone Oracle, which if you don't know it, it's a 7 mana, 4/4 flying artifact creature Sphinx. When it enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. If that player has more cards in hand than you, you draw cards equal to the difference. Up until very, very late, Sandstone Oracle was a white card. It was a 6 mana white angel. And what happened was we got to the slideshow, the very end of the process, and Rosewater noticed it and was like, hey, the color pie is wrong on this. White should not be able to do this. There's a big discussion that happened. And ultimately it got turned very late from being a white card into being an artifact instead of redesigning the card entirely. And that incident, along with some previous commander incidents, was the impetus for the Council of Colors being formed. So that kind of goes with the story we told in previous weeks about how commander designs started to make the Council of Colors occur, where different people would review different colors. Debatable these days as if white could have this effect now, but at the time, certainly it was not a thing that was part of white's color pie. So fun story there. Only other card I want to mention is a Thought Vessel, which was a pretty big card that came out of this commander product. Any thoughts for you on Thought Vessel, Melissa?
Let's see. Oh yeah, this card's cool. Yep, mana rock out there with an effect that is relevant in commander. Like this is a cool card.
Yeah, for those who don't know, Thought Vessel is a 2 mana artifact. You have no maximum hand size, so the Reliquary Tower text and tap add 1 mana to your mana pool. Yeah, to me, Thought Vessel is, I just wish it cost 3 mana. Just it's another strong 2 mana rock. We're trying to not make strong 2 mana rocks these days, but at the time we didn't really know that. So it's a fine design to make.
For its time, it was a very cool card. We are doing this less now. My thoughts are in general, 2 mana rocks that make colorless are fine in small doses. Like I'm not against it or anything. It would have to be like the right time and the right ability.
Do you like the Reliquary Tower text? I definitely think some designers are torn. Like some folks love that, lets you play your commander game with 1 million cards in your hand. But other times I play games where it's like someone has 26 cards and it takes forever. Any thoughts on that text?
I don't think it comes up often enough for me to dislike it. And I think it reads very exciting and it gives players like a really nice dream. So I think it's okay.
Okay, cool. All right, well, so we've gone through all the cycles. We've gone through the decks. Only one thing left to do, Melissa, and that is we're going to run through the awards for this show. We've got 8 awards to give out, and we're going to start with the one that has the most candidates. That is most out-of-place reprint. Okay, so here are your candidates for most out-of-place reprint.
All right, here we go. Okay. Going to have to look all of them up.
Candidate number 1. Lone Revenant, which is a card that I literally had forgotten about. So I saw it was in this commander deck. It's from Absent Sword.
It's a blue card.
Yeah, it's 5 mana, 4/4 hexproof. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, if you control no other creatures, look at your top 4 cards, put 1 in your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library. Very strange card to have in a commander deck where you're going to have a commander as one of your creatures all the time. So that was definitely a strange one to me. It is in the blue-red deck, which has fewer creatures, but still felt kind of strange. We've got Dawn Glare Invoker, which we've talked about before. It's the 3 mana 2/1 that has 8 mana to tap all your opponent's stuff, which is not 1 but 2 decks. We have Hostility, which if you don't know, Hostility is 3 red for a 6/6 haste. It's from Morrowind. It's an incarnation. So when it dies, it goes back into your library. And it has the following ability. Whenever a spell you control deals damage to an opponent, you prevent that damage, you create that many 3/1s instead. Okay. Now, Melissa, without looking, how many spells in the Giants deck do you think deal damage to an opponent?
Oh no, probably so few. Oh, this card's so sad.
There are a total of
probably like 3 or something.
Yeah, there's a total of 4. And that's including like Earthquake and stuff like that, right? So, I mean, you can do it. It's sweet when it happens, but I think a lot of players would cast this and be like, my thing doesn't work. Oh no. Fall of the Hammer, which is a 2 mana fight spell, or it's a 1-way fight spell in red, which is pretty out of place. Day of the Dragons, which is a sweet old card from Scourge. It's an 7 mana cost blue enchantment, 4 blue, for an enchantment. When it enters the battlefield, you exile all your creatures and then create that many 5/5 red dragon creature tokens with flying. When it leaves the battlefield, you sacrifice all your dragons and you bring back all the exiled cards. So kind of banishing lights all your creatures into dragons. And then finally, last but not least, is Noble Quarry. 2 green for a 1/1 unicorn with Bestow 6. So you can play it as an aura if you want. Enchanted creature gets +1/+1, and all creatures able to block Noble Quarry or enchanted creature do so. So it's like a lure that turns into a luring unicorn. There's those 6 cards up for debate here for the most out of place reprint, Melissa. Which one do you think takes home the crown?
All right, I have an answer. However, I'm just going to talk about why I think they justified some of these. We already talked about Dawn Glare. Noble Quarry, I feel, is the same as Dawn Glare in that it is something that ends the game, but it's kind of weak and more like a limited card. But it's just like, hey, this blue-green deck just plays a bunch of creatures. It has to win the game somehow. And like this is what they decided to do.
And it's got power less than 2, so it even works for the theme.
Yeah, yep. Fall of the Hammer, we mentioned, like, I felt that card was kind of flavorful, even though it wasn't the most functional. What deck is Day of the Dragons in?
It's going to be a tough time when you're asking the question, what card is this deck in? So for out of place reprint, that's tough. This is in the blue-green deck. So you go white with a bunch of small creatures. And
that makes sense to me. Blue-green deck. Yeah, so this deck has a lot of ETBs. So you can turn your small things into dragons, and then if they end up killing the enchantment, or maybe you can kill the enchantment somehow, you get your ETBs back. That sounds cool. So that's justified.
All right, so it's down to Lone Revenant or Hostility.
I don't understand Lone Revenant, so I'm just going to ignore that card for now, but Hostility is the one that wins for me because it just doesn't function super well in the deck. You just don't have enough spells that work with it. So, Hostility.
6 mana 6/6 haste. So you get like that going for you, but then you look at the text box and you're just like, oh no, it doesn't work with anything else. I've got all these 6 mana giants that maybe even deal damage when they come into play, but that doesn't work with Hostility. So that's pretty rough. I can see either my 2 are also Lone Revenant or Hostility. It's close for me. Lone Revenant has nothing to do with the deck. Hostility is at least a 6 mana cost creature, but the fact that there just isn't any interaction with it just feels like the card's lying to you. So I'm gonna go with Hostility as well. I think. Yeah, that's my pick. Okay,
it's close though.
Yeah, it's close. Curious what you all think. Let us know in the comments. Let's go into best flavor. So I've got 4 candidates for best flavor here. These are of the new cards. We've got Awaken the Sky Tyrant, which is not a card we talked about already. Awaken the Sky Tyrant is 3 red for an enchantment. Whenever a source an opponent controls deals damage to you, sacrifice Awaken the Sky Tyrant. If you do, create a 5/5 red dragon creature token with flying. So they hit you and the dragon wakes up. That's kind of cool.
That's cool.
You've got Command Beacon, which we talked about already, just like a light that brings your commander to it. That's kind of nice. We've got Seal of the Guild Pact. Seal of the Guild Pact is not an aquatic animal. It is instead a different kind of seal. It is a 5 mana artifact. As Seal of the Guild Pact enters the battlefield, you choose 2 colors. Each spell you cast costs 1 less to cast for each of the chosen colors. So makes sense. Guild Pact, pick 2 colors, Ravnica, a lot of good stuff there. Originally, by the way, this card also granted those creatures +1/+1, but alas. And then finally, Arachnogenesis, good old spider fog, 2 green, instant. Create X/1/2 spider creature tokens with reach, where X is the number of creatures attacking you. Then prevent all damage that non-spiders would deal this turn. Those are my 4 candidates. If you've one more, you'd like more, Melissa, you can shout it out. But those are my 4. Of those, what do you got?
It's between Awaken the Sky Tyrant and Arachnogenesis for me. I think they just tell the best stories. But I'm going to give it to the Sky Tyrant. Yeah, I'm there with you. I give it to Awaken the Sky Tyrant. Arachnogenesis, I think with a different name would get there for me. Its name is kind of just generic. If it was like caught in the spider's web or whatever, maybe it would work. But yeah. I'm gonna give it to Awaken the Sky Tyrant, which is a weak card, but a sweet flavor. Okay, Sweetest Legend. So we have I listed 3 candidates for this. We talked about all the legends in the product. So if you disagree, you're welcome to say your own, Melissa. My 3 choices are Mizzix, who lets you do pretty sweet stuff, even if he's kind of powerful. Daxos, and Azuri. So see if I want to add anything.
My 3 picks.
If you want to give me a second, because it's hard to look everything up,
Yeah.
So sure. you said Azuri, you said
Daxos,
Meren, and Daxos. Oh, sorry.
Mizzix,
not Meren.
Daxos, and Azuri.
Yeah, Meren's not that sweet.
Yeah, pretty wild to have two, like, same number of characters. I guess 6 and 5 letter M legends in the same set. Easy to mix them up. So, those are my 3 picks. I can believe like Arjun is maybe there too. Maybe Kalem's awesome because it tells you to play with big stuff. Maybe you love snakes. I don't know, Melissa. What's your pick?
I think it's a Zuri. Like, it reads sweet. It's powerful. It does something that, like, does one of the most fun things in Magic, which is like big creatures and combat. Yeah, Azuri.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it to Azuri too. To me, it looks fun to build with. It's also like just sweet in that it is a Phyrexianized version of a previous legend that we saw. So like on that axis, flavor axis, it's pretty cool. Maybe it should have even been a contender for best flavor, but oh well, we'll never know. Going on to most weird. Let's talk about some of the weird cards we haven't talked about yet. Here's one. We got a reader to start off with, Melissa.
Oh, no. Okay.
This is Synthetic Destiny. Okay. 4 blue for an instant. Exile all creatures you control. So you're off to a strong start.
Yep. Exactly what I want to do in Magic. Exile all my creatures.
Perfect. At the beginning of your next end step, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal that many creature cards. Put all creatures revealed this way on the battlefield, then shuffle the rest of the revealed cards into your library.
So it's like slow mass polymorph.
Yeah. So the idea with this card is they cast a Wrath and you cast this in response. So you don't get all the things right away. You get them later.
Yep.
We've got Thief of Blood. Thief of Blood is 4 BB for a 1/1 flyer. That's pretty small, but it gets bigger because as Thief of Blood enters the battlefield, remove all counters from all permanents. Thief of Blood enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each counter removed this way. So it takes them all. It's a little weird. Also note that it's weird to have in a set with experience counters because it explicitly does not take experience counters, which would have been the answer, but we didn't do it. There's Rite of the Raging Storm. This is 3 red for an enchantment. And the first line of rules text on this is just delightful to me. You read this card, and the very first thing on this card you read is, creatures named Lightning Rager can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. That's the very first thing you learn about this card. Then you learn that at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player creates a 5/1 red elemental creature token named Lightning Rager. It has trample, haste, and at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice this creature. So every turn you give that player a 5/1 with haste and trample, they can't attack you. So it's like ball lightnings for everybody. There is Mirror Match, which is 4 blue. Starts off with a great line of text right here. Cast this spell only during the declare blockers step. For each creature attacking you or a planeswalker you control, create a token that's a copy of that creature and that's blocking that creature. Exile those tokens at end of combat. It at least has some good flavor to it, which maybe helps. And then the last card I want to mention is Aether Snatch. It's pretty simple. 4 blue instant. Gain control of target spell. You may choose new targets for it. Those are my 5 options. If I read a card or you saw a card you think is weird, or you can mention it, Melissa. But what do you got for those 5?
All right, let's see. Let's eliminate cards that I don't think are that weird. Let's eliminate Aether Snatch.
Yep.
I'll eliminate Synthetic Destiny because that's just mass polymorph. And I understand the Thief of Blood. We can get rid of that guy too. So we're down to Rite of the Raging Storm and Mirror Match.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, these are both like weird. Like Rite of the Raging Storm makes sense, but like you read this card and the first thing you see, you're just like, what? And Mirror Match, like some people don't even know what the declare blocker step is. But, once you read the card, I think you can kind of figure it out what it's trying to do. So that's, I guess, a little less weird. So I'm going to give it to Rite of the Raging Storm.
I think I'm going to give it to Rite of the Raging Storm too. I'll admit that as far as weird cards go, this is probably the least weird card commander product we've seen yet of all the ones we've reviewed. So the fact that Rite of the Raging Storm is winning this award is it's winning in a weak year because these cards are all pretty straightforward for the most part, which is good and bad depending on who you are. But yeah, I'll give it to the first line of text on that being creatures named Lightning Rager can't attack you is pretty wonky. Okay, let's go on to strongest card. Here are your options for strongest card. We've talked about all these already, I think. Meren of Clan Neltoth. Going to say that one right away.
Is that the black-green thing?
Black-green commander. Yeah, strong enough to get played in Legacy. Command Beacon.
Oh, Meren. Sorry, I misheard you. If you want to erase that part. I just thought you said something else. Meren.
No erasing. Meren Clan Neltoth. There we go.
Yeah.
Command Beacon, which is a land that, at some point generates you mana by putting your commander into your hand. Mizzix Mastery, which I don't think we've read this one out yet. I should probably do it just because in case you're listening, but it's 3 in a red. Exile target card that's an instant or sorcery from your graveyard. For each card exiled this way, copy it, and you may cast the copy without paying its mana cost. Exile Mizzix Mastery. That sounds fine. 4 mana recast a spell until you learn it also has 8 mana, 5 red to overload, and cast all the spells in your graveyard.
Does it sound fine though?
Yeah, yeah.
I think the base rate of Mizzix Mastery is too strong.
That's fair enough. There's an old black card that is 6 mana to do that, I guess, right?
Okay.
So I guess that is just cheating it by 2 mana. Fair enough. So Mizzix Mastery on the table. Thought Vessel as a 2 mana rock that gives you a free upside. Mystic Confluence, it's a card that immediately went into cubes everywhere. So that's pretty strong sign of power level. And then finally, Karlov, who, as we identified earlier, is a 2 mana commander that grows really fast and can exile stuff. Those are my picks for strongest card. Once again, Melissa, if you have a different one, you're welcome to say it. But that's what I got. What do you think?
I think this is the toughest one yet, to be honest, because a lot of these cards, they are just very strong for different reasons. But we'll first eliminate Karlov because that one requires work to get going. It's a tough one. I'm just trying to eliminate things here. I think we can eliminate Command Beacon as well, because that's more kind of similar to last week. We were talking about subtle power level. It's still powerful, but I think there are other more problematic cards on this list anyway. So we can just move on and also eliminate Thought Vessel for the same reason. So we're down to Meren, Mizzix Mastery, Mystic Confluence.
Yeah.
I think Mystic Confluence is fun and appropriate. That card is strong and it makes cubes, whereas the other cards don't make as many cubes. So let's eliminate Mystic Confluence. That card just is a solid card.
Yeah, Confluence is a sweet, but not too strong, I think. I agree. I agree with you there. So it's down to Meren and Mizzix Mastery. 2 cards that make you groan when your opponent casts them. What do you think?
Yeah, these cards are both very strong on rate. Meren is both strong on rate and the play pattern is super repetitive, but it's a creature that can be killed. So you can interact with it. Really tough one you've given me here. All right. My final answer is Mizzix Mastery. This card can gain you a lot of mana. The 8 mana card, it's 8 mana, but honestly, in Commander, especially Commander these days, there are so many options for ramp. With Treasure, Mana Rocks, I think getting to 8 mana is pretty reasonable. We've seen how powerful this already is in Historic with we have Faithless Looting, we have other ways to discard powerful 8 mana sorceries and instants that people are just casting on turn 4 with Mizzix Mastery. And it just looks very powerful and a bit over the line to me. And the overload is just again, the overload only really comes up mostly in Commander. But it's hard to interact with being a spell. You just need a counter. Very little counterplay, and it just wins the game in a way that the opponents can't really do very much against it. So yeah, that is why it's Mizzix Mastery.
Yeah, I think I'm also going to go with Mizzix Mastery. To me, there are 2 different classes of powerful. Meren is very annoying over time. It's every turn you're oh, that was annoying. But Mizzix Mastery is just strong on rate. It's just at least 1 mana, if not more, undercosted. And then the overload is just the game is over immediately. And that's frustrating in its own way. So I'm going to give it to Mizzix Mastery. It's close to me. Also, the fact that Mizzix Mastery is monocolored, it just goes in more decks. It's even seen strong competitive play when it showed up in Historic, right? So yeah, I'm going to give it to Mizzix Mastery. I agree. I agree with you on that one, Melissa. Although it is close. I agree that one is really hard.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the weakest card. We've got 5 candidates for weakest card here. We've got Awaken the Sky Tyrant, which we already talked about. That's the 4 mana enchantment that if they hit you, you get a 5/5 flyer. We've got Seal of the Guild Pact, which we've already talked about, which reduces your spells that cost by 1 if they cost 1 of the colors, or 2 if they cost 2 of the colors. Then there's we got Righteous Confluence, which is sadly the white confluence, which doesn't do that much for you. Then we got 2 other cards we haven't talked about yet. There's Shielded by Faith. This is 1 white for an enchantment aura. Enchanted creature. Enchanted creature has Indestructible. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield, you may attach Shielded by Faith to that creature. So it's kind of 3 mana indestructible that lets you move it around if you want to, but not super strong. And then finally, there is Great Oak Guardian, which is 4 and a green for a 4/5 flash reach. When Great Oak Guardian enters the battlefield, creatures target player controls get +2/+2 until end of turn. Untap them. So it's like a 6 mana +2/+2 your team on a flash creature. Those are my picks. If you have a different one, you can let me know. But what do you got?
All right. Let's just eliminate Great Oak Guardian. At the end of the day, it's a creature and it can do some very powerful things in the right circumstances. Sure. So let's get that out of there. I'm just looking at these all one by one and just kind of seeing like if anything is coming close to the one that I have in first place so far. That's how I do this apparently.
Sure. Yeah.
So eliminate Righteous Confluence. 5 mana for 3 tokens is fine. And it also exiles enchantments. Just ignore the 5 life. Just remove that from the card. And we have a real card here, I think. It's a little bit on the weak side, but it's not as weak as some of the others. Okay. Awaken the Sky Tyrant. This has the side effect of opponents may not want to attack you, right?
It's true.
So it keeps you safe. And if they do attack you, you get a 5/5. So this can't be the weakest. So now we're down to Seal of the Guild Pact and Shielded by Faith. All right, let's see. I'm going to reread both before I make my decision. Oh, wow, this card is so weak. Wow, Seal of the Guild Pact is so weak.
Yeah, right. It's like,
oh my God.
For 5 mana, it can buy you a Gilded Lotus, or it can buy you like a discount. Now, granted, it doesn't tap. So like if you cast a bunch of spells in the same turn, sure. But by the time you play your 5 mana artifact, right, exactly.
Okay, yeah, like I think it's the seal. I was going to give it the Shield by Faith because this card just, I don't really want to cast this card. Like it just looks weak. It exposes you to 2 for 1 and it's hard to play and get the effect that you want out of it. But no, it's Seal of the Guild Pact. Like it's so narrow in what it reduces. Like you only get it reduced by 2 if you have both colors. And on turn 5, like you already have 5 mana, presumably, right? You cast this, so I don't think it's going to do very much for you. Like I would so much rather have so many other things, like Gilded Lotus, like you mentioned. There are lots of other mana rocks at 5+ mana that are just like so much more powerful than this. So yeah, I think it's got to be this.
Yeah, not to mention like the double discount will only apply on multicolored spells that cost more than 3 mana. Right. And a lot of your multicolored spells you're playing are like 2-3 mana really efficient cards. Yep. And it's like, well, unless you're big creatures, sure. But there's a lot of cards, like even when you are playing your 2-colored cards, you aren't getting the bonus out of it. So that's kind of a bummer too. Yeah, for me, I agree. It's Shielded by Faith or the Seal. I could see it going either way. I'll give it to the Seal, although maybe some decks would play this. Like you play this in like a combo-y deck that wants to reduce its cost to like Storm you or something maybe. But yeah, I guess I'll give it the Seal. It's pretty close. And then the final category, Melissa, what card won the set? So this is not the most powerful. It is the card that is timeless. When you think about the set, you think about this card. Here's the candidates I got for you. We've got Mizzix, which is the blue-red experience counter commander. We've got Meren, who is certainly a big face of here. We've got Mystic Confluence, card from the Confluence cycle, and probably the sweetest one, I think. Magus of the Wheel, which kickstarted Super Cycle. Thought Vessel, which gets played a lot, and Blade of Selves, which is a sweet equipment that gives all your stuff Myriad. Which of these, or it could be a different card if you have a different pick. These are mine. You could maybe argue Command Beacon or something. I don't know, but this is what I chose. What do you think, Melissa? What is the timeless card for this set? When you think of the set, what like embodies it as like the top card, the card that is the winning card here?
Trying to like make sure I don't have biases because my gut says Mystic Confluence, but we can just kind of go over the others. It's not Meren or Mizzix because like I think they just have individual problems as commanders. So I can't really give it to those. Magus of the Wheel is super sweet. Like I remember when I first read this and I was like, oh wow, Wheel of Fortune as an instant. Yeah, this is powerful. It's cool. The whole cycle, even like the older ones, was just like a really good idea to just put these powerful effects on creatures. So cool. So I can see giving it to that. Thought Vessel is like fine, but I feel like there are just so many 2 mana rock options these days. Like it's not the most memorable card for me when I think about these cards. And Blade of Selves is also super sweet. Yeah, I still want to give it to Mystic Confluence, though. It's like the cycle is awesome. You see the card in cubes to this day, and it's a commander staple as well. So yeah, I think that's what I'm going with.
And I agree with you, Melissa. To me, it goes down to Blade of Selves or Mystic Confluence. They're both totally awesome, but Mystic Confluence shows up a lot more. And when I think of this set, like I think of confluences. Actually, I think of that before experience counters. Think of that before Myriad. Like I think of confluences, and they've been so iconic as both, like in different formats, in commander decks. People love them. So maybe it's just my bias he's talking here. Maybe I haven't played enough with Blade of Selves, which is a very sweet card, and as an artifact can go into a lot of decks. But I think Mystic Confluence is like ever since I saw it, I loved it, and I still love it today. But what do all of you out there think? Maybe you have a different opinion. I know we had lots of people in the comments of our first or second episode talking about Toxic Deluge, and like, how could they not make that the winning card of the set or whatever? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. You all out there, leave us comments. But Melissa and I have Mystic Confluence down. Only one left to do, Melissa. Final grade for the set. So this is really interesting.
Final grade,
really interesting one. That the cycles were mostly hits. It's like Myriad, totally awesome. Confluences, totally awesome. A few sweet cards. Decks were kind of all over the place. Like some better than others. Some of the commanders are a little over the line. Really interesting mix of things here. What do you got? What do you got for this one?
I feel like I have to give it an above average grade because, like, as you said, the cycles were sweet. It did really feel like the designers were like starting to get the hang of designing cards for Commander. Like they're using like unique abilities, like unique design space, like experience counters, like good try for sure. Even though I didn't feel like the execution was great. Yeah, like it brought us a ton of Commander staples. I think a B. I could also see B+. I think these were overall pretty solid. Oh, also the themes were good too. Like the themes made sense, cohesive.
Well, that's pretty good. I was actually thinking you might give it something a little lower, given how this episode's gone. But also, you got to like account for how long ago it was and everything else.
Yeah.
For me, like there's a few interesting things going on here, and it is so tough for me because some of the individual cards are awesome, and the cycles are so awesome, and the mechanics are awesome, and then some of the decks don't come together. One other thing that I thought was interesting is there's just a lot of cards here that are just like blanks, more or less. They just don't show up anywhere. I did an interesting study, an interesting search. I was curious how many of these cards have ever been reprinted in another commander deck, not like Commander Anthology where they're reprinting the deck, but reprinted in another commander deck or at least a booster product. And over half of these cards have never been reprinted anywhere, which was like really telling to me, as opposed to the first. I went back and looked at the first commander decks, the original ones, as like a comp. And granted, that set had like 5 or 6 fewer cards, but only 23 of those cards had ever not been reprinted, as opposed to the 29 here that had. So even if literally every, the gap of the original commander decks, the gap of cards between the original commander decks and this one, if those were all blanks, I think it would still have fewer blanks than this set has. So there's a lot of cards in this set I think were pretty underpowered or very, very niche.
Yeah, I understand that. I have some thoughts about like why certain ones were not reprinted. Like, for example, the experience cycle, that's 5 cards. Those are very hard to reprint. They're very specific. You can probably only reprint them really together because a one-off experience card, I don't think makes a ton of sense. The Myriad cards, as we said, we both really liked the mechanic, but like the cards themselves are weak. Like I would never want to reprint one of those Myriad cards if I was designing a commander deck. They're just too weak, but like I think there is like a decent chance that we do the mechanic again because it's a cool idea in theory. Like their execution just wasn't great, but there's a lot of cool things you can do with the mechanic.
Yeah, that's a great point. There's also a lot of space paved here, right? Like experience counters, I said, maybe we could bring it back a little bit differently. Doing old characters continued here. That was important space. Tying old mechanics in as reprints was huge here, right? That was a thing that we now do a lot more of. So it did pave the way. It started off the Magus cycle. So a lot of good was done here. And we are trying to make these days. It is true. We're trying to make more niche cards so we don't have generic things for commander decks. So like making more niche stuff that doesn't get reprinted as much could actually be a good design thing. I think I'm ultimately going to give it a B-. It's on like the C+, B- borderline for me. I'll be a little more generous to it given of the time frame it was made in. But yeah, I'll give it a nice B- here. A lot of cool stuff. The confluences and the myriad alone are like really great foundations. It just feels like the decks, the place where the grade falls the most apart for me are actually the decks. Some of them are just seem a little bit off to me in their composition. But the individual cards, a lot of them are pretty sweet. So that's it. Final grade B-. I don't know where that puts us in compared to all the other sets.
Yep, no idea. Yes,
sure
somebody can just do a little compilation of everything that we have talked about so far and let us know.
I can't wait till our last episode comes out because I know then someone will do it and it'll be great. But that's been it. Thanks to everyone for sticking with us for about, 2 hours and 15 minutes or so as we walk through Commander 2015. In the next time we do one of these, exciting Commander 2016, which will be 4-color commanders. So that's a whole, and partner too, debut of partner. So both in the same set. There's gonna be a lot to talk about. Looking forward to it.
This is gonna be something.
Yeah, it'll be something. But thanks for joining us. Anything you want to say to wrap up, Melissa?
These videos have been super interesting, and I've been learning a lot. Basically, just about I'm seeing a lot of mistakes that the designers are making, and it's just interesting for me to see for my own personal growth, how much I have grown as a Magic designer. Being able to identify these mistakes and applying it to what I could do in the future. Anyway, that's just kind of a personal growth thing. So not sure if you guys all care about that, but that was my takeaway.
We should assign these videos to the new casual play design team members as required watching. 6 more views on every video, so A+.
Oh, great!
It's very important.
That's great.
But B, good little nuggets in here. I agree. Going back through these, there's a lot of things that I'm catching now that I would not have caught back then. And we're critiquing cards. And there's a lot of cards we're critiquing that are beloved, cool cards. Daxos is a great example. A lot of folks love Daxos, and it's a really fun commander. And we're critiquing it from a design standpoint. And there are problems with the design. But I think it's also worth noting that just because there are problems with the design doesn't mean it can't be beloved and cool. So Daxos has some challenges.
We are also harsh.
Yeah, right. Well, especially today, Melissa. We got to do more Friday. I don't know. Chat, you can let us know in the comments if we do more
I'm
Friday
very
episodes
interested in hearing what you guys thought.
Saturday morning Melissa versus Friday night Melissa. Who knows? But I guess that about wraps up the show for us. Thank you all for watching. It's been a blast. It's been Commander 2016. Next time we'll see you for Commander. Excuse me. This has been Commander 2015. Next time we'll see you for Commander 2016. And I think my new toilet is installed, so I'm going to go check that out. It's very exciting. I will talk. Great. Very exciting day. I'll talk with you all again soon. And in the meantime, have a lot of fun with experience counters. You got this. Sure, Geralf. So this is from a character from Innistrad. 3 blue for a 3/4 human wizard. 2 and a blue. Each player puts the top 3 cards of his or her library into their graveyard. Excuse me, I'm reading what the card says on it, but it's actually there now. Each player puts the top 3 cards of their library into their graveyard. Exile up to